The first thing Dr. Mara Velez noticed about the beast was not its teeth. Every alien in the receiving theater seemed incapable of seeing anything else. The creature had 4 ivory hooks folded over its lower jaw, each long enough to puncture a pressure door, and a second rank of smaller teeth that flashed whenever its throat sac expanded. Its 6 legs were strapped to a cargo pallet. Bands of blue restraint light crossed its shoulders, its hips, and the thick-plated tail that had already dented 2 ambulance walls. 40 hospital workers stood behind armored glass, while a surgical team waited beside a tray of tranquilizers large enough to stop a freight animal. Mara saw the trembling. It began under the creature's copper-colored hide and traveled forward in a fine ripple, too regular to be rage and too controlled to be an attempt to escape. The beast's claws struck the pallet every 4 seconds. Its throat sails tightened. Its pupils narrowed whenever the deck hummed. Then the hum stopped, and so did the trembling. Mara pressed both palms to the observation window. "Don't inject it." Chief Surgeon Aller turned 3 black eyes toward her. His 4th remained fixed on the animal. "Dr. Velez, this is a xenotrauma ward, not a terrestrial livestock clinic." "I know where I am. The animal knows too. That's the problem." The chief's facial frills darkened with annoyance. He was a tall Celeran whose silver surgical mantle carried 30 years of service knots. Mara was 24, newly arrived from the Earth Cooperative Veterinary Corps, and wore a borrowed white coat with sleeves rolled twice at the wrists. No one in Meridian Mercy Hospital had asked for a veterinarian. They had asked for a large animal containment specialist after the rescue shuttle reported an uncontrollable predator aboard. "It killed 3 people in the mine," Aller said. "The rescue report says 3 bodies were found near it. That isn't the same thing." It broke a security officer's arm on the shuttle. He fired a shock baton into its mouth. The chief faced her fully. "And your recommendation is?" The deck hummed again. The beast shivered. A low moan rolled out of it, deep enough to vibrate Mara's sternum. Behind the pallet, a small figure crouched inside the emergency transit cage. The patient was a little child called Niko, perhaps 11 standard years old, gray-skinned and narrow-limbed, with a pressure dressing over one side of his head. He had refused to leave the animal during transport. Every time the creature moaned, he curled tighter around its plated foreleg. "Turn off the gravity compensator in this room," Mara said. Aller's frills lifted. "That system keeps a 30-ton patient from crushing its own organs." "Then lower it by 5% for 10 seconds. Watch the tremor." "On what evidence?" "Its muscle contractions match the compensator cycle." The hospital's administrator, a translucent vey named Sen Arrow, stood near the rear doors with 2 security officers. Light from his internal organs pulsed yellow through his robe. "We have 47 casualties waiting for this theater. Restrain the creature, remove the child, and begin examination." One of the surgeons lifted an injector pole. The beast's right eye rolled toward it. Its pupil became a razor-thin line. "If you touch it with that," Mara said, "you will create the attack you're preparing to prevent." Aller made a small sign to the technician at the gravity console. 5%, 10 seconds. The technician hesitated, then lowered the field. The hum softened. The trembling stopped. Not gradually, not as a sedative might quiet panic. Every shaking muscle became still in the same instant, and the moan died in the beast's chest. Its 6 claws opened against the pallet. Niko lifted his head. When the field returned to full power, the tremor came back. Aller stared at the animal, then at the ceiling. "Resonant response." "Pain response," Mara corrected. "Something in its body is coupling with your field. Shut the compensator down and support it mechanically." "We do not know its natural gravity requirement." Niko spoke from behind the creature's foreleg. His voice was thin, and the translator in the cage rendered it with a soft mechanical echo. Home pulls less than this. Everyone in the theater looked at him. How much less? Mara asked. He pressed his palm against the animal's hide. Sable walks light. The moon makes him ache. His name is Sable. The child nodded. The beast's eyes shifted toward Mara. She stepped away from the glass and entered the sterilization lock before anyone could stop her. Aller followed. Doctor, we have not cleared contact. Then clear it. I need a portable field meter, thermal scanner, padded floor modules, and every recording of the mine collapse. No energy restraints. No tranquilizers until we know how its circulation works. You are making requests as if you lead this case. You called me because none of your doctors can tell whether the patient is trying to kill you. Right now, I can. The inner door opened. Heat and a mineral smell flooded over her. Up close, Sable was even larger. His shoulder rose above Mara's head. The copper hide was not scaled as she had assumed, but layered in overlapping plates that flexed like thick leaves. Blue light bands passed through them and pooled around structures beneath the skin. His tremor rattled the buckles on the pallet. Mara stopped 6 meters away, turned her body sideways, and lowered her eyes. Direct staring was a threat in more species than it was not. She let him hear her breathing. Niko whispered into one of the beast's ear folds. Sable's nostrils widened. His long tongue flicked once, tasting the air. I'm going to switch off the blue bands, Mara told the child. Will he run? He can't, Niko said. His back foot is broken. Mara saw it then. The left rear limb rested at an angle hidden by the pallet frame. Dried violet blood had sealed the plates around the ankle. The rescue crew had strapped over the injury. Will he bite? Niko considered with grave honesty. If you hurt me, if you hurt him, if you smell like the drill. Do I smell like the drill? The child leaned out, sniffed, and shook his head. You smell like rain soap. Mara crouched. Good, tell him I want to help his foot. He doesn't understand words. How do you tell him things? Niko tapped the plated leg in a sequence. Twice, paused once, then laid his cheek against it. Sable exhaled a gust that moved Mara's hair. Chief Aller entered with the field meter and a pair of technicians pushing padded support blocks. The security officers remained in the lock, pulse rifles pointed down but ready. At Mara's signal, the restraint bands vanished. Sable surged halfway upright. Alarm shrieked, rifles rose. Hold, Mara shouted. Sable did not lunge. He twisted his body around Niko, planting 5 good feet on the pallet and lifting his injured leg away from the metal frame. The motion put his plated shoulder between the child and every weapon in the room. His throat sails flared black. A roar gathered inside him. Mara knelt on the floor. He's shielding the boy, she said. Lower your guns. Neither officer moved. Aller clicked his tongue. Security, withdraw from the theater. Administrator Arrow's voice came through the ceiling speaker. Denied. This is my surgical floor, Aller said. Withdraw. The officers backed into the lock. The rifles disappeared. Sable's throat sails folded by 1 degree. Mara crawled forward until she was within reach of the nearest ivory hook. She placed the thermal scanner on the floor instead of pointing it. Sable's gaze followed every movement. Niko, can you ask him to smell this? The boy tapped. Sable lowered his head. His nostrils drew air over the scanner and then over Mara's hands. The huge mouth opened a finger's width. Mara kept still. Sable touched the back of her wrist with the blunt tip of his tongue. It was warm, dry, and rough as sandstone. That's an examination, she murmured. Fair enough. She lifted the scanner slowly. Images appeared on Aller's slate. Beneath Sable's plates ran a network of bright lines unlike blood vessels. They branched through his limbs, ribs, and skull in crystalline lattices. Aller leaned closer. Endoskeletal mineral fibers. The gravity compensator pulsed. Every bright line flared white. Sable screamed. He struck the pallet with his tail. A steel railing tore free and spun across the room. Mara threw herself over Niko as the padded blocks toppled. Aller hit the emergency cutoff. The gravity field died, leaving the room at the station's natural 1/3 standard pull. Sable's legs buckled, but the technicians shoved the supports beneath his chest. His scream faded to a pant. The crystalline lines cooled from white to blue. Mara remained against Niko until the child's hand stopped clawing her coat. "He's not a predator," Niko whispered. "I know. Everybody says he is." Sable lowered his vast head beside them. One ivory hook rested against the floor close enough for Mara to see old scratches in its surface. "Everybody has been wrong before," she said. Aller studied the scans. Piezoelectric bone. The field induces current in his skeleton. It may be stimulating every nerve simultaneously. How long was he in the rescue shuttle's full-gravity cage? 9 hours. Mara looked through the glass at Administrator Arrow. The vase inner light had faded to a cold, defensive white. 9 hours of electrocution, she said, and the only person he injured was the officer who shocked a child. Niko corrected her quietly. "Sable didn't break his arm, I did." For the first time, one of Aller's eyes showed amusement. "We will amend the report." The broken foot was worse than Mara had feared. A shard of black drilling composite had punched between Sable's plates and fractured the crystalline bones beneath. The shard carried a magnetic charge that intensified whenever the station's generators cycled. Removing it would require surgery, but Aller refused to begin until they knew whether Sable could survive anesthesia. They converted the receiving theater into a low-gravity enclosure. Cargo nets supported Sable's abdomen. Niko sat beneath his jaw while Mara and Aller collected shed skin, saliva, and a drop of blood that welled around the wound. No one used needles. Sable permitted Mara to touch him only after smelling every instrument. He watched Aller with distrust and the technicians with open suspicion, but his throat sails remained folded. 2 hours later, laboratory results made the room silent. "His blood carries 3 distinct genomes," Aller said. Mara looked over his shoulder. "Contamination. Replicated twice. One genome is his. One appears microbial, distributed through the crystalline tissue. The third belongs to multicellular organisms clustered beneath the dorsal plates." Niko understood enough translated standard to hear the last sentence. He crawled upright. "The little lights." "What little lights?" Mara asked. The child pointed to Sable's back. "He carries the valley when the sky burns. Mother showed me." Mara adjusted the scanner. Between the thickest plates were hundreds of warm capsules, each smaller than her thumbnail. Within them, tiny shapes moved. Administrator Aru entered the observation booth accompanied by a severe Morden woman in the black uniform of Helix Extraction. Her name, according to the station registry, was Prefect Dahl. Helix owned the mine that had collapsed on Ephra's surface. It also paid for nearly half of Meridian Mercy's operating budget. Dahl stared at the scan and spoke without greeting. "The creature is carrying prohibited biological material." "The creature is a patient," Mara replied through the intercom. "The animal was found in a restricted extraction zone after causing an industrial disaster. It is evidence." Niko began tapping Sable's leg rapidly. The beast's throat sails rose. "You called him an animal when you wanted him restrained," Mara said. "Now he's evidence because he survived your mine." "Which is it?" Dahl's jaw plates locked. "Veterinarian, your authority extends to emergency stabilization. It does not extend to Helix property." "Sable isn't property," Niko said. The prefect ignored him. "Administrator, transfer both survivors to corporate quarantine." Aller stepped beside Mara. "The patient is not medically stable for transfer." Aru's inner light flickered between yellow and white. How long until it is? Unknown. Then find out. We cannot delay treatment for 47 minors indefinitely. The other theaters are functioning, Aller said, and this patient may explain injuries your minors have displayed for 6 months. He projected a comparison. The crystalline microbes in Sable's blood produced a protein almost identical to deposits found in the lungs of workers from Shaft 9. Helix had diagnosed those deposits as mineral contamination. Under magnification, the particles were dormant living cells. Dahl's expression did not change. Irrelevant. Very relevant, Mara said. What did Shaft 9 drill into? Lore. What kind? That information is commercially protected. Sable trembled again. The gravity system was still off. Mara spun toward him. The shiver rolled from his hindquarters to his head, slower than before. The suspended surgical lamp swayed almost imperceptibly. Did anyone turn on a field? The technician shook his head. Mara placed her fingertips against the floor. At first she felt nothing. Then came a faint pulse, too low to hear, rising through the station's frame from somewhere below. Sable lifted his head. His pupils widened. Every capsule beneath his back plates glowed pale green. Niko went rigid. Ground song. We're in orbit, Aller said. Not ground, the child whispered. Bad song, the one before the mountain fell. A warning chimed at the gravity console. One line of yellow text appeared and vanished so quickly that the technician had to call it back. Imaginatiljarivitasi phase deviation, 0.003%. Administrator Aru dismissed it, within tolerance. Mara watched Sable struggle against the support nets. He was no longer looking at Niko or the doctors. He was looking toward the station's central axis. What is below this deck? She asked. Power transfer, Aller said. Then the neonatal wing. Sable struck the floor twice with his good forefoot. The deck jumped. This time everyone felt it. The lights went red. A roar like distant thunder rolled through the hospital, followed by the crack of breaking glass beyond the observation booth. Pressure doors slammed. An automated voice announced a containment fault in the central gravity ring. Aller ran to the console. Neonatal wing just lost stabilization. Mara looked at Sable. The tremor had started 40 seconds before the sensors sounded. The beast had not been shaking, because he intended to attack. He had been warning them. The emergency lasted 11 minutes. A phase coupler in the gravity ring had split along a microscopic flaw, sending a harmonic pulse through the station. The neonatal ward's cradles locked safely, but 3 corridors warped and a lift car dropped 2 decks before its brakes engaged. No one died. When the all-clear sounded, Sable lowered his head and closed his eyes. Prefect Dahl left the booth without another word. Mara did not like the timing. She found the mine records through Niko rather than Helix. The child carried a battered lesson tablet in the pocket of his pressure suit. Its screen was cracked, and most of its memory had been erased by the collapse, but it still held short field recordings his mother had made. Niko's mother, Avon, had been an Ephra-born surveyor employed by Helix. She had taught him the names of valley insects, cloud forms, and every Kithra in the migration herd. Sable was not a predator. Kithra ate mineral moss, burrowing glassworms, and the seed cones of trees that grew along magnetic fault lines. The great jaw hooks split rock and bark. Their crystal thread bones detected vibrations through soil. During Ephra's violent solar summers, they carried dormant spores and embryo symbionts beneath their plates from burned valleys to living ones. He carries the valley, Mara said. Niko nodded, all of it that is left. The final recording showed Avon standing before a wall of blue-black crystal exposed in Shaft 9. Behind her, Sable and 5 smaller Kithra struck the ground in agitation. The herd will not cross, Avin said to the camera. Dust streaked her gray face. The drill frequency is waking the deep lattice. I have ordered another suspension, but Prefect Dahl overruled it. If the lattice enters Cascade, the northern shelf will. The recording ended in white static. Mara played it again. In the final frame, a helix drilling unit displayed its operating frequency. It matched the station's gravity phase deviation to the 6th decimal place. Chief Aller examined the data in his private office. One wall overlooked Ephra, a blue-green planet streaked with the gray wound of the collapsed northern shelf. Rescue craft moved like sparks above the atmosphere. Helix installed Meridian Mercy's gravity ring, he said, using the same resonant technology as the mine drill. That does not prove sabotage. No. It proves they ignored the Kithra warning on the surface and never told this hospital that their equipment could excite the same crystal biology. If Dahl learns this tablet survived, she will seize it. She already tried to seize Niko. Aller's 4 eyes closed one after another. Administrator Aru will protect the institution before he protects the truth. Without Helix funding, this hospital closes. If that gravity ring cascades, it closes faster. Mara sent copies of the recording to Earth Cooperative servers, the Interspecies Medical Board, and Aller's personal archive. The first 2 transmissions failed at the station firewall. The third succeeded because Aller's account had surgical priority. You realize, he said, that I can be dismissed for this. You realize I met you this morning, and already know you hate being wrong more than you like being employed. His mouth plates shifted. It was not quite a smile, but Mara accepted it. They still had to operate on Sable. The black fragment in his foot was not inert. Every ambient field made it vibrate deeper into the fracture. If it reached the main crystal branch, it could shatter the entire limb or send a lethal current through his heart. A general anesthetic might suppress the muscles without stopping the crystal microbe network. Energy restraints would reproduce the pain. Mechanical restraints would trigger panic and risk crushing Niko, whom Sable would not release. Alien medicine had protocols for 100 intelligent species and 10,000 domestic animals. None covered a 30-ton living seismic instrument with a child under its jaw. Mara proposed operating without restraint. The surgical committee rejected the plan in 28 seconds. Then let me examine him while he's awake, she said. If he can choose to hold still, we do not need force. Administrator Aru's light flashed orange. It is a beast. Niko stood on a chair beside Mara. The bandage had been removed from his head, revealing a row of black stitches. He chose to carry me out. Instinct, Aru said. He chose not to bite your doctors. Conditioning. He warned your station. Coincidence. Mara leaned toward the conference camera. You have renamed every piece of evidence so that you never have to change your first opinion. That is not science. The chief surgeon's frills spread in open support. I authorize a conscious assessment under emergency discretion. And if it attacks, Aru demanded. Then Dr. Velez will be closest, Aller said. Thank you, Mara muttered. You are welcome. They cleared the theater except for Mara, Aller, Niko, and 2 surgical technicians. Mara prepared a local anesthetic based on Sable's nerve chemistry. She rubbed a drop on an uninjured patch of skin first. He sniffed it, sneezed hard enough to shake the lamps, and glared at her. I know, she said. It smells terrible. Earth horses agree with you. Niko tapped the request pattern against Sable's leg. The beast lowered his injured foot onto a padded block. Mara touched the skin near the wound. Sable's claws dug into the padding, but he did not move. She pressed harder, his throat sails lifted. That's enough, she said. He understands the request. Aller looked from her to the enormous jaw. Does he understand that we intend to cut into his foot? No, we'll show him. Mara brought a transparent model printed from his scan. She inserted a black replica shard into the model, then removed it with forceps. Niko watched, understood, and repeated the demonstration against Sable's uninjured foot with a blunt stick. The beast smelled the model. He smelled the forceps. Then he stretched the wounded leg toward Mara and laid his head flat on the floor. Aller's voice softened. "Joyce." "Yes." The operation began. For the first 7 minutes, Sable remained motionless. Mara injected local anesthetic around the wound, avoiding the bright crystal branches. Aller opened the plated skin. Violet blood filled the incision and clotted almost instantly into glassy beads. The fragment lay 3 centimeters below, vibrating with each pulse of the station. At minute 8, an alarm sounded in the corridor. Sable's eye opened. "Ignore it," Mara whispered. At minute 9, gravity returned to the room. The field slammed through his skeleton. Sable convulsed. Aller's instrument flew from the wound. The support nets snapped taut. Niko was thrown backward and Mara caught him before his head struck the pallet. "Cut the field," Aller shouted. The console did not respond. Administrator Aru appeared on the observation screen. His light was frantic yellow. "Security has assumed environmental control. Prefect Dahl has issued a biohazard transfer order." The theater doors opened. 6 Helix officers entered in magnetic armor. Their restraint cannons charged with the same blue light that had tortured Sable since his rescue. Mara did not remember deciding to move. One instant she was shielding Niko beside the operating pallet. The next she had crossed the wet floor and planted herself between Sable and 6 armored officers. "There is an open surgical site behind me," she said. "Fire and you will kill him." The lead officer's helmet speaker crackled. "Stand aside, doctor." "No. This organism carries an unregistered biological reservoir. Corporate quarantine protocol supersedes local medical authority. You activated the field during surgery. Your protocol nearly ruptured his heart. Stand aside." Aller kept one hand pressed over Sable's wound. Violet clots formed between his fingers. The fragment continued to vibrate inside the exposed fracture. Sable's body shuddered around them, but his eye remained fixed on Mara. He could crush everyone in the room by trying to rise. He did not. Niko crawled beneath Sable's jaw and tapped an urgent pattern against the floor. The officers advanced. Mara picked up the discarded thermal scanner and threw it at the nearest ceiling light. Glass burst. Darkness swallowed the center of the theater. Sable's dorsal capsules flared green beneath his plates, turning the beast into a vast living constellation. The officers' helmets compensated, but not fast enough. Aller struck the gravity console with the steel handle of a surgical mallet. Sparks sprayed. The field died. Sable stopped convulsing. He moved with terrifying speed. His tail swept low across the floor, not at the officers but at their feet. 6 armored bodies lifted in the weak natural gravity and tumbled into the support nets. Before any could aim, Sable planted one forefoot on the restraint cannons and pressed. Composite barrels cracked like dry sticks. He could have closed his jaws on the officers. Instead, he curled his tail around Mara, Niko, and Aller, drawing them behind the shield of his body. The lead officer struggled upright. His sidearm rose. Niko stepped out from shelter. "You said he killed people," the boy said. "Watch him not kill you." The sidearm shook in the officer's hand. Chief Aller's surgical team arrived at the other door with every intern, nurse, and orderly on the floor behind them. No one carried a weapon. They carried patient slates, recording lenses, and the quiet authority of people who had spent their lives standing between death and the vulnerable. "This procedure is being transmitted to the Interstellar Medical Board," Aller announced. It was a bluff. The firewall still blocked external traffic. Any further interference will be documented. The lead officer looked at Sable, at the shattered cannons, and at 100 recording lenses. He lowered his sidearm. "Prefect Dahl will close this hospital," he said. "Then she may explain why," Aller replied. The officers withdrew. Mara did not breathe normally until the doors sealed. She returned to the wound. The black shard had shifted during Sable's convulsion and now touched the brightest crystal branch. A thin line of white light raced upward beneath his skin. "We have minutes," she said. The fragment's magnetic charge made steel forceps useless. Aller fetched ceramic extractors, but the shard clung to the crystalline fracture as if welded. Every attempt to pull it increased the current. Sable's pulse weakened. Niko stared at the wound. "The drill eats song. Mother used mud." "What kind of mud?" "Red mud, from under the glass trees. It makes the little drills sleep." Mara remembered the dormant cells in the miner's lungs. The microbes in Sable's crystal tissue were not merely passengers. On Ephra, they may have dissolved or insulated magnetic minerals. She opened the laboratory report and searched the chemistry. "Iron-binding enzymes," she said. "Aller, the microbial cells produce a chelator when the pH drops. We do not have red mud. We have the culture from his blood. Feed it glucose and lower the pH to 6.2. The lab grew a concentrated suspension in 9 frantic minutes. Mara injected it around the shard. The fluid shimmered green. At first nothing happened. Then black material began to flake from the fragment, and the white line beneath Sable's skin dimmed. Aller gripped the shard with ceramic forceps. "Now," Mara said. Together they pulled. The fragment came free with a wet snap. It was longer than Mara's hand and sharpened by the fracture into a jagged spear. Sable's foot jerked once. Niko tapped the calming pattern. The beast exhaled and went still. Aller repaired the crystal branches with a matrix of Sable's own clotted blood. Mara closed the skin between the plates. At no point did Sable attempt to bite, rise, or pull his leg away. When the final seal set, he lifted his head and touched Mara's shoulder with the side of an ivory hook. The gesture was gentle enough to make her eyes burn. "You're welcome," she said. The station's central vibration returned before she could stand. Sable's dorsal lights blazed. This tremor was stronger. Surgical tools walked across the tray. The water in a glass rippled into a 6-pointed pattern. The beast turned toward the deck and uttered 3 deep pulses. Niko's face emptied of color. "Run song." The station alarm remained silent. "How long?" Mara asked. "Before the mountain fell, 4 songs." "How long is that?" "I don't know." Aller opened engineering diagnostics. The gravity ring reported normal function. Only the tiny phase deviation remained, now 0.009%. "The sensors are calibrated to mechanical failure," Mara said. "Sable senses the field before anything breaks." "Where is it coming from?" The beast answered, by dragging himself off the operating supports. His injured foot could not bear weight, but he lurched toward the north pressure door on 5 legs. Niko ran beside him. Mara blocked the exit. "You just had surgery." Sable lowered his hooks, placed them around her without touching, and lifted her neatly out of the way. Aller made the almost smile again. "Your authority appears limited." They followed. Sable moved through Meridian Mercy like a walking earthquake. Patients flattened themselves against corridor walls. Nurses abandoned carts. Security doors opened for Aller's emergency code until they reached the central transit spine, where Prefect Dahl's lockdown stopped them. Through the transparent wall, Mara could see the gravity ring turning around the station's axis. Blue phase coils flashed in perfect sequence. Between flashes, something dark traveled inside the light. Sable struck the sealed door with one jaw hook, not hard. Once, twice, then 3 times. The crystal wall around them resonated. Behind the door, the ring answered. A low tone rose through the structure. Sable's legs folded. His dorsal capsules glowed so brightly that their outlines showed through his hide. Niko covered his ears, although the sound was mostly below hearing. It knows him. Mara watched the dark shape in the coils. Not him. What's inside him? The microbial lattice is responding to the ring. Aller pulled up the station construction records. The phase coils used Epherian crystal ore extracted from Shaft 9. Helix had built the hospital ring from the same living mineral network it was drilling on the planet. The cleansing cycle sterilized equipment and air, but no one had tested whether the ore itself was biological. "The gravity ring is alive," Niko said. "Partly," Mara replied, "and it's sick." The ring's diagnostic system showed no error because each coil still produced the expected force, but the phase timing drifted as dormant cells awakened and connected across the circuit. Each pulse recruited more crystal. A biological cascade was spreading around the station faster than the computers could recalibrate. "Can we shut it down?" Mara asked. Aller contacted engineering. No answer. Prefect Dahl had sealed the control room and ordered the chief engineer to maintain full field until Sable could be removed. An abrupt shutdown, Dahl claimed, would endanger thousands of patients adapted to high gravity. "A cascade will invert parts of the field," Aller said. "Some decks will go weightless. Others could experience 10 or 20 standard gravities." "How many people?" 8,000, including staff. Sable gave the second-run song. Mara looked at the sealed door. "Then we do not wait for permission." They took a service route through the neonatal wing. Sable could not fit into the maintenance shaft, so he struck different sections of the wall while Mara held a vibration sensor against them. One panel answered with a hollow tone. Behind it lay a coolant conduit that led around the lockdown bulkhead. Mara, Niko, and Aller crawled through. Sable remained on the other side, his eye visible through the opening. He made a soft sound when Niko disappeared. "Stay," Niko told him. "We come back." The control room contained 4 engineers, 2 Helix guards, and Prefect Dahl. Dahl stood before the manual cutoff with a data drive connected to the console. Streams of files vanished from the archive. "You're deleting the ring history," Mara said as she dropped from the conduit. Dahl spun, seized them. The engineers did not move. The guards did. Aller stepped in front of Niko. "There are premature infants 20 meters from this room. Discharge a weapon and the medical board will not be your greatest concern." One guard grabbed Mara by the wrist. She drove her heel into the flexible joint behind his knee. Earth-normal muscle in 1/3 gravity sent him into a console. The second guard reached for Niko. The wall exploded inward. Sable's ivory hooks emerged through metal and peeled the panel aside. He had followed the child's scent to the far side of the room and found a structural seam. The guard froze with his hand extended. Sable leaned his head through the gap and breathed on him. The guard sat down. "Mean beast," Niko said solemnly. Mara almost laughed. The third-run song stopped her. Every coil on the display turned amber. Chief Engineer Pell, an elderly low-gravity Arkan, shoved Dahl away from the cutoff. "We need a staged shutdown. If I drop all sectors together, decks 1 through 6 lose vascular support." "How long?" Aller asked. 20 minutes. "We may have less than one song," Mara said. Sable forced his head farther through the wall. He ignored the people and stared at the ring schematic. The pattern of amber coils reflected in his eye. Niko touched the screen and then Sable's hook. "He wants down." "Into the ring," Pell said. "Impossible." "He can tell which coils will fail first," Mara said. "And how does he communicate that?" Sable struck the wall beneath Coil 12's conduit. On the schematic, Coil 12 flashed red. Pell's thin ears rose. That could be coincidence. Sable struck twice beneath coil 4. It flashed red next. He feels the network, Niko said, like roots. They opened the service doors. The gravity ring filled a cylindrical chamber 300 meters across. Rotating spokes connected its coils to the station axis. Crossing them during operation was forbidden. Field gradients could tear metal implants from flesh or make a person's blood weigh more than bone. Pell slowed the ring, but could not stop it without starting the cascade. Sable entered first. His injured foot dragged. Every phase flash brought a spasm, yet he moved to the edge of the central gantry and lowered his jaw hooks against the deck. The crystalline fibers in his skull carried the ring's song directly into him. Niko walked at his shoulder until Mara caught the child and fastened a safety tether around his waist. No farther without this. He needs me. Then he needs you alive. Pell began shutting coils in the order Sable indicated. 12, 4, 19, 2. Each darkened coil reduced the tremors, but the remaining field surged to compensate. Gravity tilted. Mara's boots lifted from the gantry and slammed down sideways. Aller anchored a medical sling around Sable's chest. Halfway through the sequence, Prefect Dahl appeared at the chamber entrance with one of the broken restraint cannons rewired to fire. "The ring must remain operational," she shouted. "The ore contract depends on proof of stability." Pell stared at her. "You would risk a hospital for a contract. If this station fails, Helix loses HFY and every claim in the system. If the creature is blamed, the operation survives." Mara understood then that the lockdown had never been about quarantine. Dahl needed Sable to panic. A dead beast in a destroyed hospital could carry every accusation. The prefect aimed at Niko. Sable saw her. He turned away from the ring, exposing the lights beneath his plates. His mouth opened. The roar that emerged was not a threat display but a wall of sound. It struck Dahl physically. Her cannon fired into the gantry. Blue restraint energy splashed across Sable's chest. The beast convulsed and fell. His vast shoulder pinned Mara's leg. The gravity ring surged. Niko's tether snapped taut as the child lifted toward a spinning spoke. Aller caught the tether with both upper hands. Pell clung to the console. Dahl slid across the tilted deck toward the open ring. Mara could reach either Sable's emergency counteragent or the prefect's outstretched hand. She caught Dahl. Pain tore through Mara's pinned knee as she braced. Dahl hung over the rotating chamber, one hand locked around Mara's wrist. "Why?" the prefect gasped. "Because patients aren't evidence," Mara said, "and neither are enemies." Aller hauled Dahl up with one lower arm while holding Niko's tether with the others. Mara injected Sable's counteragent between his plates. His eye opened. The final cascade began. All remaining coils flashed white. For an instant Mara weighed nothing. Then her body became crushingly heavy. The gantry groaned. Sable's crystalline skeleton lit beneath his hide, a branching skeleton of green and blue. He had one choice left. He dragged himself across the gantry and drove all 4 jaw hooks into the live ore conduit. Current erupted around him. Niko screamed his name. Sable held on. The microbial suspension circulating through his blood flowed into the conduit through old cracks in his hooks. Green light spread from the points of contact, racing around the ring. The biological lattice changed rhythm. Instead of reinforcing the gravity pulse, it began consuming the magnetic impurities that drove it. The beast was not merely sensing the cascade. He was healing it. Pell stared at the display, phase deviation dropping. "Continue the shutdown," Mara said. One by one, the coils went dark. The final field collapsed with a sound like a great breath released. The station settled into natural orbital microgravity. Loose instruments floated above the gantry. Sable's body drifted gently against his sling. jaw hooks still buried in the conduit. His dorsal lights went out. Niko pushed away from Aller and flew to him. Sable, Sable, wake. Mara pulled herself along the tether. No pulse showed in the beast's throat. His crystal branches were dark on the scanner. She pressed both hands against a gap in his chest plates and felt nothing. The field stopped his heart, Aller said. Then started. Electrical stimulation will fracture the lattice. Mara looked at the green microbial residue coating the conduit. Sable's heart had never depended only on muscle. Its crystal branches stored charge and released it in a slow sequence. We don't need a shock, she said. We need his rhythm. Niko knew it. The child pressed both feet against the gantry, wrapped his arms around Sable's foreleg, and tapped the same pattern he had used in the theater. Twice, pause once. Twice, pause once. Mara repeated it against the chest plates. Aller joined on the opposite side. Pell struck the metal deck with a wrench. Nurses and engineers gathering at the chamber entrance took up the rhythm. Twice, pause once. Nothing happened. They continued. Mara's palms went numb. Niko's tapping weakened. Aller adjusted the rhythm to match the interval recorded from Sable's heart before surgery. Twice, pause once. A single green light appeared beneath the beast's shoulder. Then another. The crystal branches filled slowly, pulse by pulse. Sable's chest expanded. Air rushed into him with a ragged groan. His eye opened on Niko. The child pressed his face against the copper hide and sobbed. Sable lifted one great foreleg around him, not tightly, just enough to hold him near. Behind them, every alarm on Meridian Mercy fell silent. Silence lasted 6 seconds. Then 8,000 people discovered what a hospital without artificial gravity sounded like. Carts struck ceilings. Fluid bags pulled free of brackets. Patients called from rooms as beds drifted against safety nets. The neonatal wings sealed cradles floated safely, but 3 intensive care patients began choking when medication pumps lost feed pressure. Aller left Sable only after Mara swore she would monitor his pulse. He launched himself down the corridor with his mantle streaming behind him and organized the response in the clipped, implacable voice of a surgeon who had no time left for anyone's fear. Mara remained in the ring chamber with Niko, Pell, and the beast. Her left knee had swollen beneath her trousers. Every time she pushed from the gantry, pain flashed to her hip. She ignored it while she sealed burn gel over Sable's chest and tested each jaw hook for fractures. You should be in imaging, Pell said. He should be in intensive care. We're both compromising. Prefect Dahl floated inside a web of cargo straps under the supervision of 2 hospital orderlies. No one trusted Helix security to hold her. Her black uniform was torn, and violet bruising spread along one side of her jaw. You saved me to make a performance of it, Dahl said. I saved you because you were falling. Humans always need witnesses to their virtue. Mara fastened the last monitor patch. No, we need witnesses at your trial. Dahl's eyes narrowed. There will be no trial. Helix owns the communication relays, the rescue fleet, and the surface courts. When this station asks for supplies, the company will decide whether anyone hears. Pell rotated his chair toward her. You just tried to destroy my hospital. I protected 6 million contracts. You protected a number on a ledger. That number feeds 11 colonies. Do you imagine morality replaces supply chains? If Epherian ore is classified as living matter, exports stop. Settlements lose gravity systems. Hospitals lose funding. People die because a veterinarian decided a beast looked frightened. Mara pushed herself close enough that Dahl could see the fury she had been holding since the theater. I did not decide he looked frightened. I observed a physiological response, tested a hypothesis, and changed my conclusion when the evidence changed. You had the same evidence months ago. Avon warned you. The herd warned you. Sick miners warned you. You kept drilling. Dahl said nothing. That isn't a difference of morality, Mara continued. It's malpractice with a balance sheet. The external relays remained locked, exactly as Dahl predicted. Administrator Aru attempted to override Helix control and discovered that the hospital's communication license had been suspended for a supposed biohazard. Rescue shuttles in orbit received automated orders to dock at a corporate quarantine barge. Even Earth cooperative channels disappeared from the network. But Helix had not built its private firewall to stop a child. Niko's lesson tablet contained a weather mesh application used by survey families on the surface. It communicated through bursts reflected from HFY's upper atmosphere, too small and irregular for the corporate filters to classify as messages. Avon had once used it to send homework assignments between field camps. Pell compressed the mine recording, the ring logs, and Ahler's surgical footage into thousands of weather packets. Niko supplied his mother's old classroom address. The packets dropped toward HFY like digital rain. Who receives them? Mara asked. Teacher Sen, Niko said, if the school is still there. And if it isn't? He held the tablet close. Then the clouds remember until another school listens. Mara had no idea whether that was scientifically precise or something Avon had told a lonely child. Either way, Pell launched the transmission. Sable woke properly 4 hours after the ring shut down. He found himself floating beneath a network of support straps, disliked the sensation immediately, and pulled the entire web loose from its anchors. Mara returned from having her knee sealed to discover a 30-ton Kithra drifting through the central transit spine, steering with slow sweeps of his tail while Niko rode between his shoulder plates. Patients pressed to windows, some screamed, others recorded. Sable paused beside the neonatal wing and placed one hook against the glass. Inside, a nurse held a transparent cradle containing 3 tiny gel infants. Their soft bodies glowed with weak pulses under the emergency lamps. One infant turned toward Sable's green dorsal lights and reached 4 miniature hands toward him. The beast's throat sac expanded. A sound too low for the intercom traveled through the wall. All 3 infants' pulses steadied. The nurse stared at her monitors. Mara checked twice to make sure it was not coincidence. Sable sounded again, and the unstable respiration of the smallest infant synchronized to the rhythm. Vibrational regulation, she said. Their nervous systems are responding. Ahler arrived with an expression suggesting he had personally argued gravity back into existence and resented finding a new mystery. I will not prescribe a 30-ton animal as neonatal equipment. Sable sounded a 3rd pulse. A premature human baby stopped crying. Ahler's frills lowered. I will consider a controlled study. The video spread through the hospital's local network. So did footage of Sable refusing to harm the Helix officers. Staff who had called him a beast that morning began bringing mineral fruit from the cafeteria and asking Niko which pieces he liked. Sable rejected every offering except a block of compressed silicate used to calibrate bone printers. He bit it cleanly in half, chewed with grave satisfaction, and pushed the second piece toward Niko. He thinks I eat rocks, the child explained. Do you? Mara asked. Only when I was little. Mara decided not to investigate. Administrator Aru visited after the hospital stabilized. Without artificial gravity, his translucent body had expanded into a delicate bell shape. He propelled himself by contracting the edges of his robe. Dr. Velez, he said, I owe you an apology. Mara looked at Sable's foot scan. You owe him one. Aru's inner lights rippled blue. He approached the beast alone, stopped outside hook range, and inclined his entire body. Patient Sable, I classified your fear as violence and your warning as inconvenience. I permitted your treatment to be influenced by financial authority. I was wrong. Sable sniffed him. The administrator's lights flickered as the huge nostrils drew him several centimeters closer. Sable sneezed. Arrow spun backward through the air and collided with a ceiling pad. Niko covered his mouth. Mara failed to hide her laugh. Even Oller's mouth plates shifted. "He accepts," Niko said. "Does he?" Arrow asked from the ceiling. "No, but he thinks you smell funny." The first answer to Niko's weather transmission arrived 9 hours later. Teacher Sen was alive. Her school had become a shelter for 400 families displaced by the shelf collapse. She had reconstructed 31% of the files and forwarded them through the planetary education mesh. Within an hour, every surviving school receiver on HFY began relaying the evidence. Helix shut down the public network, but by then miners had copied it onto suit channels, freight beacons, irrigation controls, and domestic cleaning machines. The truth traveled through the planet on systems too ordinary to silence. Workers at 7 shafts put down their drills. Rescue pilots ignored quarantine orders. The surface court issued a preservation warrant for Helix records. A colonial marshal aboard an aging customs cutter contacted Meridian Mercy through a line-of-sight lamp signal and placed Prefect Dahl under arrest. Dahl received the warrant without visible emotion. "You think this ends with me," she told Mara as the orderlies transferred her. "The shelf is still collapsing. The ore is still alive, and your precious animal carries the only uncontaminated biological archive Helix has ever found. Every government in range will want him." Sable's eye followed her to the door. "Then they can ask," Mara said. The next crisis arrived before the marshal's cutter docked. In the pulmonary ward, a miner began to glow. The patient, Jarek Saul, had been excavated from Shaft 9 after 70 hours underground. He had multiple fractures and severe dust exposure but had seemed stable. At 3:12 station time, green lines appeared beneath the skin of his chest. By 3:20, every dormant cell in his lungs had awakened. Aller sealed the ward. 46 other miners showed the same change within the hour. "The ring shutdown altered the ambient magnetic field," he said. "The cells are seeking a new network." Mara studied their scans beside Sable's. In the Kithra, the microbes lived inside crystal bone channels and released charge harmlessly through the jaw hooks and feet. In the miners, they had settled in soft tissue. Their branching filaments were wrapping around blood vessels. "Can you kill them?" Administrator Arrow asked. "Possibly," Aller said, "but their cell walls share proteins with the patient's damaged lung tissue. A broad antimicrobial could dissolve both." "Extract them." "There are millions." Jarek woke during the consultation. His eyes reflected green. "I can hear the station," he whispered. The other miners heard it too. They described faint rhythms in pipes, fans, and heart monitors. Some found the sound beautiful. Others screamed until sedated. When a maintenance motor started 3 decks away, all 47 patients convulsed together. Sable heard their distress. He limped to the sealed pulmonary door and lay beside it. The miner's heart rhythm stabilized, just as the infant's had. His microbial lattice seemed to provide a reference signal, keeping their cells from responding chaotically. "He can control the infection," Mara said. "Temporarily," Aller replied, "but he cannot remain beside 47 beds forever." Niko opened another of Avon's recordings. She had filmed a group of Kithra rolling in red mud at the base of a glass forest. Afterward, they shook clouds of green-lit droplets from their plates. Smaller animals gathered to breathe the mist. "It isn't mud that makes the drills sleep," Mara said. "It's a transfer medium. The Kithra distribute balanced microbes through the ecosystem." Aller magnified the image. "A competing strain may regulate the one in the miners." "Do we have a sample?" Niko shook his head. The valley shown in the recording lay beneath the collapsed northern shelf. Sable nudged the tablet. He recognized the place. His jaw hooks scraped the floor in agitation. There may be another deposit, Niko said. Summer shelter, south side. The child drew a route from memory. It crossed the broken mining zone and ended at a canyon 90 kilometers beyond the last mapped road. Aller looked through the ward glass. The green branches in Jarek's chest had reached his heart. How long? Mara asked. At the current rate, 12 hours before the first vascular rupture. The rescue fleet was still tied up with surface casualties. Helix had disabled hospital shuttles before losing control. The only craft available was a veterinary transport Mara had arrived in, the Resolute, designed to carry Earth livestock between orbital farms. It had one pilot seat, a low-gravity cargo bay, and landing gear rated for pasture rather than a planetary fault zone. It won't hold Sable, Pell said. It held 8 rhinoceroses on series, Mara replied. How large is a rhinoceros? Smaller, much smaller, but more argumentative. Sable pushed himself upright. His repaired foot shook when it touched the deck. He cannot travel, Aller said. He knows the route. Niko knows the route. The child looked at the blank spaces on his map. Some. Mara knelt beside Sable. You saved the station with an open fracture. You do not owe us anything else. Sable lowered his head until one enormous eye filled her view. In its reflection she saw herself. Small, exhausted, one knee braced, still wearing dried violet blood on her coat. The beast touched his hook to the pulmonary door. On the other side, Jarek raised a trembling hand to the glass. Sable turned toward the shuttle bay. That's a choice, Niko said. Aller's eyes closed in resignation. Then we support it. They reinforced the Resolute's cargo deck with surgical braces and suspended Sable in a web of livestock slings. Aller insisted on coming to monitor the fracture. Pell came because the living ore would require field analysis. Niko refused to be separated from Sable, and no adult found an argument that survived the look in the child's eyes. Administrator Aru remained behind to hold the hospital together. Before the hatch closed, he handed Mara a sealed medical transmitter. The marshal's warrant gives you temporary evidence authority, he said. If Helix tries to stop you, broadcast everything. Through what relay? Aru's inner lights pulsed with something like mischief. Every school on Ephra. The Resolute left Meridian Mercy under maneuvering thrust. Behind it, the hospital floated dark around its silent gravity ring. Ahead, Ephra's atmosphere filled the windows, beautiful enough from orbit to hide the broken mountains below. Mara strapped into the pilot couch. She had flown cargo approaches, never a descent through a debris storm. The automated system rejected the northern route as unsafe. She disabled the rejection. Is that wise? Aller asked over the intercom. No. Good, I wanted a precise diagnosis. They entered the atmosphere. Ash struck the hull like rain. Lightning crawled sideways through clouds of pulverized crystal. The navigation display filled with false terrain returns as living ore responded to the ship's sensors. Mara flew by visual gaps and the pressure of her harness. In the cargo bay, Sable began to tremble. Not fear, not pain. Warning. How many songs? Mara called. Niko listened to the pulses traveling through Sable's sling. No songs. Left. Mara banked left before the terrain alarm sounded. A section of mountain broke through the cloud where the Resolute would have been. Rock the size of buildings rolled through the air, buoyed by magnetic currents. One struck the shuttle's right engine. The craft spun. Mara fought the controls as alarms blurred into one continuous tone. The right engine died. The left overheated. Beneath them, a glass forest appeared through the ash, thousands of translucent trunks surrounding a narrow red canyon. That is the summer shelter, Niko shouted. Then we're arriving. Are we landing? Mara watched the dead engine tear free. Eventually, the Resolute hit the forest tail first. Glass trunks shattered in luminous sheets. The cargo bay tore through 3 trees, bounced across a ridge, and came to rest with its nose hanging over the Red Canyon. For several seconds, everything remained where impact had thrown it. Then the left landing gear folded, and the shuttle tilted another 10 degrees toward the drop. Mara released her harness. Pain knifed through her braced knee, but the joint held. Report. Alive, Aller answered. I dislike flying, Pell said from beneath an overturned equipment case. Niko's voice came over the cargo intercom. Sable is stuck. Mara reached the bay to find 2 suspension straps twisted around the beast's jaw hooks. Sable hung partly above the deck, bleeding from a reopened seam in his foot. Niko had already unfastened his own harness and was climbing toward the release buckle. Stop, Mara said. If that lets go, he falls on you. The shuttle creaked. Outside the open side window, the canyon waited 50 meters below. Aller cut the upper straps while Mara braced Sable's shoulder with the cargo loader. Pell shifted ballast toward the rear. At Mara's count, the final buckle opened. Sable dropped onto the deck. His weight drove the shuttle's nose lower. Out, Mara said. They blew the rear hatch. Pell launched equipment cases onto the slope. Aller carried Niko. Mara released Sable's belly sling and guided him backward with taps Niko had taught her. The Kithra crawled on 5 legs through the hatch seconds before the shuttle slid over the edge. The Resolute fell into the canyon and struck the bottom in an eruption of red dust. Pell watched his field laboratory vanish. I had instruments in there older than you. Now they're farther from retirement, Mara said. They had salvaged 1 medical pack, a short-range transmitter, 3 water cells, the microbial culture kit, and 2 thermal blankets. The forest surrounded them with broken music. Wind moved through hollow trunks, producing tones that shifted whenever the ground trembled. Green moss traced the fractures in the glass. Sable smelled the air. His throat sails opened. He called once, a deep note that traveled between the trees and returned in layers. No Kithra answered. Niko touched his leg. Summer shelter is below. The direct path descended the canyon wall where the shuttle had fallen. Sable could not climb it with his injury. They followed the rim south, searching for a gentler slope. Every kilometer cost him. Blood seeped from beneath the repair seal, and the crystalline matrix in his foot had begun to split. Mara stopped after an hour. We rest. Sable continued. She stepped in front of him. No. He lifted his hooks around her, as he had in the hospital. Mara grabbed both hooks and held on. You can move me, I know, but if that bone branch shatters, you will never reach the shelter. The beast exhaled against her hair. Niko tapped her words into his plated foreleg. Sable lowered himself reluctantly. Aller opened the wound while Pell assembled a chemical heater from the transmitter battery. The fracture was decaying around its edges. Without the hospital printers, they could not rebuild it. Mara mixed powdered silicate from the forest moss with Sable's blood and packed it into the gap as a temporary support. How long will that hold? Niko asked. If he walks carefully, 6 hours. He never walks carefully. Sable nudged him sideways. He heard that, Mara said. They found the descent at dusk, although Ephra's ash-covered sun barely changed the color of the sky. The canyon opened into an underground basin roofed by crystal arches. Warm springs filled red mud pools between banks of silver grass. The air smelled of iron and rain. Green lights moved beneath the mud. The regulating strain, Aller said. Pell knelt at the nearest pool with the culture kit. His analyzer showed thousands of microbial variants living in connected films. Some bound iron. Others broke magnetic crystals into harmless salts. The particular strain they needed should respond to Sable's lattice signal. "We need him in the water," Pell said. Sable had already entered. He sank until only his head and dorsal plates remained above the red surface. Green light bloomed around his body. The capsules beneath his plates opened like tiny flowers, releasing threads into the mud. Across the basin, dormant patches answered one after another. Aller collected samples. "This can regulate the miners, if we return in time." Mara checked the transmitter. The crash beacon had sent their location, but no rescue craft acknowledged. The ash storm blocked orbit, and Helix still controlled most aircraft on the continent. "We can climb to the old survey mast," Niko said. He pointed toward a black structure rising beyond the basin. Mother used it. The mast stood 10 kilometers deeper in the canyon. A damaged cable car hung between them and the far ridge. Its rails crossed terrain Sable could navigate, but the route passed beneath the collapsed edge of the northern shelf. Sable emerged from the mud with his plates shining. His foot no longer bled. The green film had hardened around the temporary repair. For the first time since Mara met him, his tremor was absent. Then the silver grass moved. Small shapes rose around the basin. At first Mara mistook them for rocks. They had 6 legs, soft copper plates, and jaw hooks no longer than fingers. 23 Kithra calves watched from the grass, their dorsal capsules blinking uncertainly. Niko made a sound between a laugh and a sob. "The little lights." No adults followed. The calves approached Sable. He lowered his head and sounded a pulse. They crowded against his legs and climbed over his tail. Several bore burns from the shelf collapse. One dragged a rear limb. Another had a helix tracking spike embedded beside its throat. Mara understood why Sable had crossed the mining zone before the disaster. He had not wandered into Shaft 9. He had been moving the youngest members of his herd toward the summer shelter. When the shelf fell, he carried Niko out and left the calves here, trusting the basin to protect them. "Where are their mothers?" Aller asked. Niko looked toward the collapsed mountain. Holding the bad song. Avon's final recording had shown 5 adult Kithra beside Sable. Their bodies had likely remained over the deep lattice while the mine failed. Perhaps their crystal networks absorbed enough of the cascade to give the children and workers time to escape. Sable moved among the calves, touching each with his tongue and hooks. When he reached the injured one, he looked at Mara. "I see it," she said. The tracking spike transmitted a faint corporate signal. Mara numbed the calf's neck and pulled it free. The instant she did, the short-range receiver chirped. Helix had followed the beacon. 3 aircraft descended through the crystal arches. They were not rescue shuttles. Black armored skimmers spread across the basin exits, each carrying a containment cage large enough for 1 adult Kithra. Prefect Dahl had been right about one thing. Other people wanted Sable. A voice amplified from the lead skimmer. "By authority of helix extraction, all biological assets in this zone are subject to emergency preservation. Step away from the specimens." Pell looked at the 23 calves. They brought 24 cages. "They knew," Mara said. "The tracking spike marked this herd." The skimmers deployed drones armed with blue restraint beams. Sable placed himself between them and the calves, but his body shook at the first charging hum. One direct hit could restart the damage in his skeleton. Mara opened Aru's sealed transmitter. The device still could not reach orbit, but the survey mast might boost it through the weather mesh. "We need to get these animals to the mast," she said. "The northern exit is blocked," Pell replied. "The cable route is exposed." "Then make the basin harder to enter." Pell studied the red pools. The microbial film responds to magnetic fields. Aller understood. The drones restraint generators. They opened every sample vessel except the one needed for the miners and poured concentrated culture into the connected springs. Sable struck the mud with his jaw hooks. A regulating pulse spread through the water. The first drone entered the basin. Green filaments rose from the pool and clung to its blue field emitters. The drone shuddered. Its restraint beam bent sideways and struck a crystal arch. Living glass responded with a note like a bell. A second arch answered, then a third. The basin became an instrument. Every drone pulse produced a new harmonic. The skimmer's guidance systems filled with false returns. One aircraft veered into a mud pool and sank to its landing fins. Another fired blindly, bringing a curtain of harmless crystal dust down between Sable and the calves. "Move," Mara shouted. Niko ran toward the southern trail, tapping the migration pattern against two stones. Sable followed. The calves streamed behind him in a clumsy copper-colored line. Mara and Aller guarded the injured stragglers while Pell carried the medical sample inside his coat. Helix officers pursued on foot. The trail narrowed beneath the shelf. Slabs of broken ore hung above them, suspended by magnetic forces that changed with every aftershock. Sable trembled, stopped, and pushed Niko against the canyon wall. 3 seconds later, a crystal blade crashed across the path where the child had stood. The officers rounded the bend. Their commander raised a kinetic rifle rather than a restraint weapon. "Stop the adult," he ordered. "Calves preferred intact." Mara lifted the transmitter's recording lens. "Your order is live." He fired anyway. The shot struck Sable below his shoulder. Copper plates burst outward. The beast fell across the trail. Calves screamed in a chorus of high whistles. Niko ran toward him. Mara caught the child with one arm and dragged him behind a rock. More rounds chipped the canyon wall. Aller pressed his medical pack against Sable's wound, but the projectile had entered deep. Sable raised his head. His eyes were no longer on the officers. They were fixed on the suspended shelf above them. The beast sounded a warning pulse. The officers mistook it for a roar and kept advancing. Mara felt the ground answer. "Down!" Sable drove his good forefoot into the trail. The impact sent a precise vibration through the living crystal, not enough to collapse the shelf, enough to change where it rested. The suspended slab shifted. A wall of rock descended between the herd and the officers. It sealed the path without crushing anyone. Dust blasted through the canyon. When it cleared, the Helix team was trapped on the far side. Sable tried to rise and failed. Mara cut away the damaged plate. The rifle round had passed between two ribs and lodged near the heart lattice. Each breath pushed it closer. "We need surgery," Aller said. "We need a sterile room. We need gravity. We have red mud and a blanket." The survey mast was visible 2 kilometers ahead. They could not carry Sable, and the calves refused to leave him. The shelf would not hold Helix forever. Mara looked at the old cable car hanging above the canyon. Its passenger cabin had fallen away, but the flat maintenance platform remained attached to the lower rail. It could support perhaps 10 tons. Sable weighed 3 times that. "Pell," she said, "can the rail's magnetic suspension be strengthened?" The engineer looked from the platform to the beast. "With what power source?" 23 pairs of green dorsal lights blinked around them. Pell followed her gaze. "No." The Kethra lattice powered down the station ring. That was an uncontrolled biological interaction. "Then control it." "I am an engineer, not a magician." Today the distinction is flexible. They cut the maintenance platform free and dragged it beside Sable. Pell connected its magnetic coils to 2 long strips of living ore. Niko arranged the calves along the strips and tapped a slow rhythm. Their dorsal lights synchronized reluctantly. At first the platform did nothing. Sable sounded from the ground. The calves answered. Green current passed through the ore. The platform lifted 5 centimeters, then 10. Its alarm insisted that every physical limit had been exceeded. They rolled Sable onto it. The magnetic suspension sagged but held. Mara climbed beside his head. Aller knelt over the rifle wound. Niko led the calves along the rail path, and the impossible little procession moved toward the survey mast while the mountain broke behind them. The mast had survived because its builders anchored it to a non-magnetic basalt spine. Its upper beacon was dead, but Pell found emergency power in the cable controls. He connected Aru's transmitter and aimed the dish toward the sky. Ash drowned the signal. "More power," Mara said. "The cells are empty." Sable opened his eye. His heart lattice glowed around the bullet. "No," Mara told him, "you have given enough." He touched one hook to the mast base. The calves gathered around him. One by one they placed their small hooks against the living ore strips. Their dorsal lights brightened. Sable released a pulse, and the entire herd answered. The mast woke. A column of green light climbed through the ash storm. It carried the mine recording, the ring logs, Dahl's confession, the officer's order to fire, and the medical request for immediate evacuation. Every school receiver on HFY echoed it. Weather satellites picked it up. Rescue craft turned north. So did Helix aircraft. Pell watched the display. First medical shuttle 14 minutes, first corporate skimmer 9. Aller looked at Sable's wound. "He has 5. Mara opened the remaining sample kit and laid out her instruments on the thermal blanket. "Then we start now." The alien doctors had prepared restraints when Sable first arrived, because they believed force was the only way to make a beast hold still. On a mountainside beneath a burning sky, with enemies approaching and a bullet against his heart, Sable lowered his head beside Mara and chose stillness again. The projectile had mushroomed against the outer branch of Sable's heart lattice. It leaked magnetic charge with every beat, turning the surrounding tissue white on the scanner. Mara could not pull it along the path it had entered. Barbs had opened inside the wound. "We go through the chest plate," Aller said. "That branch is carrying half his circulation. If we leave it, it carries none in 4 minutes." Mara showed Sable the scanner image. His eye tracked the bright shape. She laid the ceramic forceps against the plate they would have to cut. Niko tapped an explanation into his foreleg, his small hands moving so quickly that the pattern blurred. Sable looked toward the calves. They clustered around the survey mast, still feeding it power. The injured calf stood closest, its repaired neck pressed against the living ore strip. Sable returned his gaze to Mara and opened his throat sails. The pulse he produced was soft and steady. "He says do it," Niko whispered. Mara numbed the plate margins. Aller cut a triangular window with a hand saw because every powered instrument disturbed the crystal network. Violet blood welled and hardened around the blade. Beneath the plate, Sable's heart was not a discrete organ but a long muscle wrapped around glowing mineral branches. The bullet sat between 2 of them. The first Helix skimmer appeared over the ridge. Pell extended the mast dish toward it and flooded its guidance sensors with the herd's signal. The aircraft rocked but continued, 2 more rows behind it. 7 minutes to medical rescue, he said. We need 3, Mara replied. Aller inserted the forceps. The bullet's barbs caught. Sable's claws scored the basalt. His pulse accelerated. The heart lattice brightened, magnetizing the projectile harder against itself. The more pain, the stronger it sticks, Mara said. Additional anesthetic risk, stopping respiration. Niko began the calming rhythm. Twice, pause once. The calves heard and repeated it with their hooks against the ore. The mast transmitted the rhythm across the mountain. Sable's pulse slowed. The magnetic field weakened. Aller rotated the bullet 1 degree, folded the first barb, then the second. Mara held the heart branches apart with ceramic loops. Her hands remained steady until a restraint beam struck the mast. Blue light exploded across the platform. The calves scattered. The maintenance platform dropped to the ground. Sable's body shifted and the bullet tore a branch. Violet blood flooded the surgical window. Suction, Aller said. They had none. Mara used the hollow stem of a silver grass plant and drew the blood into an empty culture vessel by hand. Niko shielded the opening from ash with his own body. Aller found the torn branch, sealed it with microbial gel, and pulled again. The bullet came out. Mara threw it over the cliff. Sable's heart gave one violent contraction, then steadied. Green light returned to the damaged branch. Aller closed the plate window with the beast's glassy clots and wrapped the chest in the thermal blanket. The lead skimmer landed 50 meters away. Corporate officers deployed behind portable shields. Their commander, a different Morden with gold marks across his helmet, addressed Mara through an amplifier. You are interfering with a planetary containment operation. Release the specimens and no charges will be filed. Mara stood in front of Sable, surgical blood to her elbows. Your people shot a protected patient on a live transmission. The transmission is fabricated. Every school receiver on the planet replayed his words back through the survey mast. Niko raised the lesson tablet. Fabricate this. The commander signaled. Officers advanced. The calves pressed against Sable, frightened and exhausted. He tried to rise. Mara put a hand on his nose. No, you will tear the repair. His eyes shifted toward the officers. We handle this one. Pell had found the old survey mast's purpose. It did more than transmit weather. During the first settlements, it mapped magnetic fault lines by sending harmless resonance pings through the living crystal. The range control had corroded, but its direction system still worked. Can you knock down their weapons? Mara asked. No, Pell said, but I can ask the mountain where they are standing. He fired a survey pulse beneath the officers' boots. Their magnetic armor answered. Living ore mapped every suit in green light visible through dust and shields. The calves saw the pattern. Instinct took over. They struck their hooks against the basalt in a chaotic chorus. The mountain magnified it. Every armored officer began vibrating like a tuning fork. Weapons shook from their hands. Helmet displays filled with interference. One by one, they fell, unharmed but unable to stand. The commander tore off his magnetic chest plate and charged on foot. Niko threw a rock. It hit the commander's forehead with a crisp knock. In low gravity, he stumbled backward, stepped onto the discarded plate, and slid down the red slope into a mud pool. I broke his other arm, the child said. Probably not, Mara replied. I can try again. The medical shuttle arrived with the Colonial Marshal's cutter above it. The cutter locked weapons on the skimmers. Helix officers surrendered while rescue medics spilled onto the ridge. They brought a mobile surgical cradle, proper power, and enough lift capacity for Sable. More importantly, they carried 47 sealed culture dispensers prepared from Aller's instructions. Pell divided the red mud sample among them. Each received a droplet of Sable's blood to set the regulatory rhythm. The first dispenser launched toward Meridian Mercy within 6 minutes. The medics wanted to sedate Sable for transport. Mara refused. They wanted energy straps. Aller refused more loudly. In the end, Sable walked into the cradle on 5 legs with Niko beside him, while the calves followed into a second cargo bay lined with red mud and silicate blocks. As the shuttle lifted, Mara looked down at the shattered Resolute in the canyon. Does your insurance cover that? Pell asked. Only if I claim an act of nature. Sable touched one hook to the window. Accurate, Aller said. They reached Meridian Mercy with 4 hours remaining on Aller's first estimate. The station still floated without artificial gravity. Inside the pulmonary ward, green networks had spread through the miners' bodies. Jarek Saul no longer spoke. His blood pressure fell each time a maintenance motor cycled. Mara carried the first dispenser to his bed. The regulating culture formed a red-green mist. Aller administered it into the breathing circuit while Sable sounded from the corridor. The new cells entered Jarek's lungs. Nothing changed for 12 seconds. Then the branching light beneath his skin shifted from chaotic flashes to the twice-pause-once rhythm. His blood pressure rose. The filaments withdrew from the vessel walls and condensed into harmless crystal beads that his lungs could remove. They treated all 47 miners. One patient experienced a severe immune reaction. Mara used a diluted fraction of Sable's plasma to interrupt it. Another had so much crystal deposition that Aller performed surgery while the Kithra's pulse guided his hands. By morning, every patient was stable. Jarek woke with Niko asleep in a chair beside him. Sable's hook rested against the observation glass. "I heard him in the mine," the miner said. His voice rasped through damaged lungs. "We thought he was making the shelf shake." "He was telling you it was going to," Mara said. Jarek closed his eyes. "Avon told us, we laughed at her." "Then help make sure no one laughs next time." Helix lost control of EFRA in 43 hours. Once the evidence escaped, creditors froze corporate accounts. Worker councils occupied drilling sites. 3 colonial governments suspended contracts and dispatched independent inspectors. Prefect Dahl and 26 officers faced charges ranging from evidence destruction to attempted mass casualty sabotage. The company blamed rogue employees. Pell released design records proving executives had known the ore's biological origin for 7 years. Helix engineers had observed phase drift in early prototypes and suppressed the data because living material required expensive interspecies protections. The gravity systems on 11 colonies contained Epherian crystal. Dahl's warning became real. Hospitals, habitats, and freight stations across the region faced shutdown. Panic moved faster than evidence. One colony destroyed its gravity core and injured hundreds in the evacuation. Another ordered every Epherian biological sample incinerated, which made the instability worse. Rumors claimed Kithra could control ships, infect mines, or turn whole cities into living machines. Mara appeared before the emergency council from Sable's recovery enclosure. She disliked cameras and had not slept in 30 hours. Behind her, 23 calves climbed over medical padding while nurses attempted to count them. "The crystal is not attacking anyone," she said. "It is a symbiotic system reacting to conditions we created without understanding it. You do not solve ignorance with fire. Shut each core down in sequence, introduce the regulating strain, and rebuild field timing around its biological rhythm." A counselor asked whether the treatment made Kithra necessary to every gravity system. "No. We can culture the microbes and record the pulse. Then the animals are no longer strategically essential." Mara heard what lived under the question. If Sable was not essential, some governments would see no reason to protect him. "They were never equipment," she said. "They are living creatures with their own social decisions. Their value does not begin when we need something from them or end when we find a machine that can imitate it." The counselor changed the subject. Teams from Earth, Celerin medical worlds, and Epherian schools worked together to stabilize the 11 gravity networks. Aller's protocol began with a single instruction in capital letters: "Do not restrain a trembling KETHRA." Pell added 30 pages of engineering mathematics below it. Mara added an appendix on consent, handling, and the difference between immobility and calm. The protocols worked. No colonies closed. No more miners became ill. For a brief week, it seemed possible that facts had outrun fear. Then a fleet arrived to claim the herd. The ships bore the white crest of the Concordat Conservation Authority, a respected interstellar organization with legal power to relocate endangered species. Its director, Versh Kaur, spoke gently and wore no weapon. He praised Mara's treatment, expressed concern for the calves, and presented a court order naming the Kithra a critically depleted biological resource. "We will move them to a controlled preserve," he said, "far from mining, politics, and future disasters." Niko stood between Sable's forelegs. "On Ephra, a safer world. Their world is Ephra. Their habitat is unstable. You made it unstable." Kaur smiled with practiced sadness. "Child, sometimes preservation requires difficult choices." Mara reviewed the order. It appeared lawful. Ephra's surface government had signed it during the first hours after the disaster, when officials believed Sable had caused the collapse. The document granted the authority custody of all remaining Kithra, their symbionts, embryos, and biological derivatives. "Biological derivatives includes the minors we treated," Aller observed. Kaur's smile disappeared for half a second. Obviously, the clause would be interpreted reasonably. "By whom?" The director declined to answer. Sable trembled when the conservation ship docked. Mara checked every field reading. The hospital ring was off. The transport cages used mechanical supports. No hidden restraint emitters showed on scanners. Still Sable trembled. Kaur gestured toward the beast. "You see, orbital confinement is harming him. Transfer is urgent." Mara put her palm on Sable's foreleg. The tremor traveled in a different direction than before. It began in the chest and moved outward. His nostrils drew the air from the docking corridor. Fear had a scent. So did recognition. Sable had smelled something from Kaur's ship. Mara followed his gaze to a sealed cargo hatch behind the conservation team. The manifest listed medical substrate, food, and empty preservation modules. Thermal sensors showed no life. But Sable's dorsal capsules lit whenever air leaked around the hatch. "Open that compartment," Mara said. Kaur's assistant stepped in front of it. "It is sterile storage." "Then opening it presents no risk. Our warrant does not authorize hospital inspection." "Your ship is docked to my quarantine floor," Aller said. "It does now." Kaur signaled his team. The conservation officers did not draw weapons. They activated sonic emitters hidden beneath their white uniforms. Sable collapsed in pain. The calves scattered. Niko fell beside them with blood running from one ear. Mara's own balance vanished as the sound struck her inner ear. Director Kaur stepped across Sable's neck and pressed an injector against the beast's plates. "You were right about one thing, Doctor," he said. "Restraint is unnecessary when terror works better." Kaur's injector never touched Sable. Mara could not stand, but Earth had trained her vestibular system under a full standard gravity. The conservation officers came from a low-gravity world and trusted their sonic filters. She rolled beneath the emitter cone, caught Kaur's ankle, and pulled. He fell across Sable's jaw. Aller struck the nearest officer with a floating medicine case. Niko crawled toward the wall controls. The calves fled blindly around the enclosure, their small hooks tearing curtains and padding. Sonic pressure climbed until Mara's vision doubled. Sable's tremor changed. He was not only in pain, he was searching for the frequency. His crystalline network had mapped the gravity ring, the mine, and the mountain. Now it mapped the weapon moving through his body. He sounded one low pulse below the emitter's range, listened to the interference, and sounded a second. The calves answered. 23 imperfect tones filled the enclosure. Some were high, some weak, some broken by fear. Together they formed a shifting chord around the sonic beam. The hidden emitters began to vibrate against their owners' uniforms. Mara understood. "Change your note." Niko tapped faster. The calves swept through frequencies. The officers' equipment tried to compensate and overloaded. White uniforms tore at the seams as emitters burst into sparks. Silence returned. Sable rose. Director Core lay between his 4 jaw hooks. He closed his eyes, expecting them to close around him. Sable lifted him by the uniform and placed him inside an empty medical pen. Niko sealed the gate, preserved. Core's assistant surrendered. Myra opened the cargo compartment herself. The air inside smelled of antiseptic and burned mineral. Rows of black preservation cylinders lined the walls, none large enough to hold an adult Kithra. Thermal scans showed only coolant. Sable remained at the hatch, trembling and calling softly. Niko walked between the cylinders. Near the rear wall, he stopped. Someone is singing. Mara heard nothing. The scanner detected nothing. She touched a cylinder and felt a faint vibration through its casing. Aller broke the seal. Cold mist rolled out. Inside, suspended in transparent gel, floated thousands of green capsules scraped from Kithra dorsal plates. Most had been cut open. Tiny embryos and symbiotic organisms drifted separately in labeled compartments. The next cylinders held jawhook tissue, crystal marrow, and preserved organs. Identification codes matched adult Kithra from Sable's herd. They took samples before the collapse, Mara said. Niko found Avon's field tag on one cylinder. Beneath it, a corporate record listed the source as Subject K7, terminated during invasive acquisition. Sable sounded again. An answering pulse came from beyond the rear wall. Pell removed a panel. A narrow cryogenic chamber lay inside the ship's hull, omitted from the manifest. Within it floated one living Kithra calf, smaller than the others, its body wrapped in sensor wires. A row of surgical scars crossed its back. Its dorsal capsules had all been removed. The calf's eyes were open. It had been conscious inside the cold gel. Mara's hands shook as she disconnected the feed lines. How long? Aller read the monitor. 6 months. Niko pressed both palms to the chamber. Lumen. You know this one. Avon's smallest. He disappeared before the drill started. Dahl said a rock took him. Sable struck the deck once. The entire conservation ship answered. Mara had never believed an animal could express grief in a way every species would understand. She changed her mind. They warmed Lumen slowly. His heart lattice barely functioned without its symbiotic capsules. The Preservation Authority had kept him alive as a source of clean tissue, removing parts whenever researchers needed them. Director Core called it necessary study. Kithra reproduce slowly, he said from the pen. Without intervention, this lineage dies in 2 generations. We developed artificial propagation. By carving up a conscious baby, Mara said. By saving a species. Did you ever ask why the embryos failed outside their capsules? The symbiotic mechanism is complex. No, the social mechanism is complex. You separated every piece and assumed life was just assembly. Core looked at Sable. You are sentimentalizing an animal. You keep using that word as permission. Lumen did not respond to medication. His crystal branches dimmed as they warmed. The calf lacked the microbial diversity necessary to regulate his circulation. They had the red mud strain, but not the hundreds of organisms removed with his dorsal capsules. The other calves gathered around the chamber. One pressed its back against Lumen's through the open gel membrane. A capsule beneath its plates unfolded and released a glowing thread. Another calf did the same. Then another. Their symbionts traveled through the gel into Lumen's damaged skin. Sable lay beside them and sounded the twice-pause-once rhythm. Green lights appeared along Lumen's spine. Mara and Aller monitored in silence as the herd rebuilt what the preservation scientists could not. Each animal contributed a different microbial strain. They did not surrender all their capsules, only enough. When one calf weakened, another took its place. The process lasted 7 hours. Lumen breathed on his own at dawn station time. His new dorsal lights were uneven, a patchwork of colors from the entire herd. He opened his eyes and made a thin whistle. Sable answered. Niko slept with his head against both of them. The evidence aboard Core's ship changed the case from corporate negligence to interstellar trafficking. Helix had secretly sold Kithra tissue to the Conservation Authority, which patented biological functions and licensed them back to gravity manufacturers. The official preserve had never existed. Relocation orders sent animals to research facilities hidden behind conservation law. This time no one could call the proof fabricated. Hundreds of hospital workers witnessed the attack. Lumen's medical history bore Core's encrypted signature. The smuggling compartment contained samples from 16 protected worlds. The Emergency Council revoked the authority's charter. Core and his senior staff were taken into custody. Independent sanctuaries received the surviving animals from other species, but Mara insisted that none be moved until members of their own communities, local ecologists, and veterinary teams agreed on a plan. For the Kithra, the plan seemed obvious. They belonged on HFY. The difficulty was that HFY was still breaking. The northern shelf continued to send magnetic aftershocks through the continent. Climate models predicted that ash would cover the glass forests for 3 years. Red mud basins had been buried or contaminated. No one knew how many wild Kithra remained. Returning Sable and the calves could save their ecosystem or kill the last known herd. The council asked Mara for a recommendation. She refused to give one from orbit. "We can debate risk until the calves are grown," she said. "First we find out what the planet is actually doing." She organized a ground survey led by Etherian teachers, miners, veterinarians, and engineers. No corporate security. No weapons above emergency flare pistols. Every vehicle used mechanical suspension rather than magnetic lift. Sable recovered for 3 weeks before Aller cleared his heart and foot. Lumen required a padded cart, but refused to enter it until another calf went first. Niko remained under hospital guardianship while the court searched for relatives. Teacher Sen arrived from the surface and offered to take him. He accepted on the condition that Sable could visit. "Your house is not large enough," Sen said. "He can sleep outside." "The schoolyard is not large enough." "We can move the school." Sen looked at Mara. "Has he always negotiated like this?" "Since I met him." Mother said asking small is how adults make you settle. Sen sighed. Avon did say that. The survey descended in 6 rugged crawlers. This time Mara did not fly. Pell drove the lead vehicle with the caution of someone still mourning his laboratory. Aller complained about dust while wearing a field mantle he had secretly ordered in advance. Sable walked beside Niko's crawler. The calves followed in pairs, except Lumen, who rode until the terrain smoothed. Crowds gathered along the route. Some people held signs apologizing for the mine. Others left silicate blocks and red water at the road edge. Sable ignored the signs, ate 2 blocks, and tipped the water container over himself. At Shaft 9, drilling towers stood silent above the crater. A memorial wall carried the names of 412 people lost in the collapse, including Avon. Niko placed her field tag beneath the final name. Sable touched one ivory hook to the wall. The calves grew still. Miners removed their helmets. No speech had been planned. None was needed. After a minute, Sable turned toward the ruined shelf and began to walk. The instrument said the route was unsafe. The beast said otherwise. Mara had learned which she trusted, though Pell checked every reading twice. They crossed fault lines minutes before they shifted, avoided pockets of charged dust invisible to radar, and found 3 stable red mud basins beneath collapsed glass. At each basin, the calves rolled and released symbionts. Dormant moss brightened behind them. Insects emerged from mineral shells. The Kithra were not merely occupants of the forest. They restarted it. On the 5th day, Sable stopped at the edge of a valley erased from every post-collapse map. He trembled. Mara checked the ground, the equipment, and his old injuries. Nothing explained it. The tremor began in his chest, as it had when Kor's ship arrived. Recognition. A pulse traveled from beneath the ash. Sable answered. The ground moved. One copper-plated head emerged through a crust of gray dust. Then another. 5 adult Kithra climbed from a buried migration tunnel, thin and scarred but alive. Behind them came 9 calves and an elderly beast whose jaw hooks had worn down to blunt curves. Niko ran before anyone could stop him. The nearest adult lowered her head and caught him gently between her hooks. A faded survey harness circled her neck. Avon's handwriting marked it with one word: Ember. Sable approached her. The 2 animals stood nose to nose, trembling so strongly that their plates clicked. No field caused it, no hidden weapon, no pain. They were alive, and each had believed the other dead. Their calls rolled through the valley until the glass forest answered. The hidden herd had survived by sealing themselves inside an ancient migration tunnel while the shelf collapsed. Ember and the other adults used their crystal bones to redistribute each aftershock around the chamber. They had remained there for 27 days, living on mineral roots and the water stored beneath their plates. The elderly Kithra had kept the calves' heart rhythms synchronized whenever the deep lattice surged. Mara learned this without words. The tunnel walls recorded vibration as bands of colored crystal. Pell translated the patterns into a timeline. Every warning pulse, every stabilizing chord, and every moment of silence remained embedded in the stone. The Kithra had made a seismic history more precise than helix instruments. At the center of the chamber, Ember had scratched a map of the valley with her hooks. It marked red mud basins, nursery shelters, and a line leading toward Shaft 9. She planned to go back, Niko said. Mara traced repeated grooves beside the route. She was counting days. The elderly beast watched them. When Mara pointed to the map, he added a new line toward the south. It ended at a cluster of symbols matching 23 calves. He knew Sable had returned with the missing young. He knew the herd would need a new route. He was planning it with them. Aller recorded the exchange. The medical board will have difficulty calling this conditioning. The Conservation Authority will call it instinct, Pell said. Then instinct has become better at cartography than their directors. The reunion changed the survival calculations. 38 Kithra were still dangerously few, but their genetic and microbial diversity exceeded the samples stolen by Helix. More important, the adult herd knew shelters no database contained. Removing them from EFRA would erase the knowledge that kept them alive. The survey team established a temporary field hospital at the valley edge. Mara examined every animal, always beginning the same way, presenting her hands, letting the patient smell each tool and waiting for a voluntary step forward. Some refused. She documented what she could see and left them alone. Others watched Sable accept treatment and approached in their own time. Ember distrusted Aller's silver mantle. She hooked it off his shoulders and buried it in red mud. She may associate reflective fabric with helix suits, Mara said. Aller retrieved the dripping garment, or she has no respect for seniority. Also possible. Lumen's recovery transformed when he joined the wild adults. His patchwork capsules brightened, and he learned to balance on weak rear legs by walking between Ember and Sable. The first time he rolled in natural red mud, every calf joined him. Niko joined too. Mara found the child coated from head to foot and laughing under Sable's tail. "Teacher Sen is going to blame me," she said. "You can roll too." Then she won't know who started it. That is not how evidence works. Pell, already red to the elbows, looked away. The good news lasted until the southern fault opened. It happened at midday beneath a refugee settlement called Arvin Hollow. 10,000 displaced people lived there in modular shelters on what Helix maps identified as stable basalt. The Kithra map showed a buried crystal river directly below it. Sable began the run song 6 minutes before orbital sensors registered movement. Mara transmitted the warning. Settlement officials refused to evacuate on an animal's prediction. They had received 3 false automated alerts that week and feared moving injured residents into an ash storm. Niko pushed into the transmitter view. It is not an animal's prediction. It is Sable's. He was right at the mine, the hospital, the forest, and the shelf. How many times do you need him to save you before you listen before the ground breaks? The settlement director hesitated. Teacher Sen appeared behind Niko, mud on her boots. Arvin Hollow School, begin route red. This is not a drill. Teachers moved first. They loaded children onto crawlers and followed the migration map south. Parents followed children. Medics followed patients. By the time officials issued a formal order, half the settlement was already moving. Mara traveled with Sable and the adult herd toward the fault. The Kithra did not flee directly away. They split into groups and struck the ground at different points, sounding into the buried lattice. Pell overlaid their positions on his model. They are steering it, he said. A fault cannot be steered. Not the fault, the resonant energy. They're opening smaller paths so it doesn't release beneath the settlement at once. Every pulse cost them. White currents ran through their bones. Several animals bled from the hooks. The elderly Kithra collapsed after the third sequence and still tried to rise. Mara stood in front of him. Enough. He pushed against her with his blunt hook. I know this is your valley. You can help by staying alive. The beast trembled with effort. She placed a scanner on the ground and showed him the fracture spreading through his chest lattice. Then she pointed to 2 younger adults waiting nearby and tapped the transfer pattern Niko had taught her. The old Kithra looked at the younger pair. He sounded once. They took his position in the circle. Consent did not always mean letting a patient make the choice Mara preferred. Sometimes it meant giving him enough information to make a different choice himself. The buried river ruptured at 16:07 local time. The earth rose beneath Arvin Hollow like the back of a waking animal. Empty shelters folded. Crystal burst through streets in luminous walls. Because the Kithra had split the resonance, the release traveled along 5 abandoned mining trenches rather than one catastrophic wave. The settlement was destroyed, but 9,812 residents had reached the southern ridge. One school crawler did not. It had lost power near the medical quarter, with 31 children aboard. The driver sheltered them inside a supply tunnel moments before the main rupture buried the entrance. Their emergency beacon transmitted through rock, but reported falling air. Rescue drills could not approach. Every motor aggravated the living crystal. Manual excavation would take days. Sable walked toward the tunnel. Mara caught his shoulder plate. Your heart has not healed. Ember stepped beside him. Then Lumen. The scarred calf could barely carry his own weight, but he placed his hooks against the ground and searched for the beacon's vibration. The other young formed a line behind him. Adults arranged themselves around the buried tunnel. They're making a path, Pell said. The Kithra sounded in sequence, not a warning or a run song. A slow alternating pattern traveled through the crystal, softening one seam while hardening the roof above it. Green light traced a corridor toward the trapped school. Miners took hand tools and followed. Mara joined them despite Aller's objection to her knee. No powered drill entered the ground. Each time the rock changed, Sable warned them. Each time dust closed the air, Ember opened a new fracture no wider than a finger to vent it. They reached the supply tunnel after 11 hours. The children sat in darkness around their teacher. Some cried when the wall opened. Others stared past the rescuers at the enormous jaw hooks breaking through stone. Sable lowered his head into the chamber. One little girl climbed onto his nose. "I knew the mountain animal would come," she said. The teacher laughed until it became a sob. Sable carried 4 children at a time in the hollow between his hooks. Ember carried 5 along her back. Lumen insisted on carrying a bag of school slates and nearly fell over under the weight. All 31 children emerged alive. Footage of the rescue reached the Interstellar Court on the morning. Judges considered the relocation order. Director Corps' attorneys argued that emotional images did not change environmental risk. Helix's remaining representatives argued that the Kithra were hazardous organisms whose resonance behavior caused unpredictable geological events. Myra testified from Arvin Hollow, with the destroyed settlement behind her. "You claim these creatures prevented greater loss," a judge said. "Can you prove they did not initiate the rupture?" Pell submitted the buried river model, helix drill records, and the vibration history from the hidden tunnel. Aller presented Sable's medical scans showing injuries produced while diverting the resonance. Miners described the escape. Teachers described the map. The judge examined Sable through the transmission. "Dr. Velez, your reports repeatedly refer to patient choice. Are you asking this court to classify the Kithra as sapient?" Mara had thought about the question for weeks. Sapience law offered strong protection, but it measured other minds against behaviors favored by courtroom species. Symbolic language, technology, commerce, formal politics. The Kithra did not need to become bad imitations of people to deserve safety. "I am asking the court to stop treating uncertainty as ownership," she said. "If you cannot determine the limits of a being's understanding, caution should increase its rights, not decrease them." Sable plans, teaches, grieves, consents, refuses, protects, remembers, and changes behavior when given new information. If that does not fit your category, repair the category. Do not cut him down to fit it. Corps requested permission to cross-examine. Though held in custody, he remained technically director until the charter hearing ended. "Doctor, did this animal ever communicate a desire to remain on Ephra in a language you could translate?" "Yes." "Produce the translation." Mara stepped away from the camera. Niko placed 2 terrain maps on the ground before Sable. One showed the Ephirian Valley, its red basins and glass forests marked by scent samples collected during the survey. The other showed the proposed off-world preserve, a safe green planet with no living crystal. Beside each map lay a cargo marker. Niko tapped the choice pattern and withdrew. Sable smelled both maps. He picked up the off-world marker, carried it to Lumen's medical cart and placed it there. Then he set the Ephra marker before the healthy herd. Lumen still needed access to orbital care. The others did not. "He separated the answer by medical need," Mara said. "Do you require him to sign?" Corps had no further questions. The court issued an interim ruling before sunset. Kithra would be recognized as self-directing ecological persons under Ephirian guardianship, not state or corporate property. No animal could be relocated, sampled invasively, restrained, or exposed to artificial fields without demonstrated necessity, and where possible, behavioral consent. The herd's migration routes became protected territory governed jointly by local communities and a council of independent scientists. Niko read the ruling to Sable. "The beast ate the corner of the slate." "He objects to paragraph 14, Aller said. "He objects to silicate-based screens," Mara replied. "A distinction the court should consider." The permanent ruling came months later and extended the same uncertainty principle to nonverbal species across 12 member worlds. Lawyers called it the Velez doctrine. Mara disliked the name and spent every interview redirecting credit to Avon, Niko, the miners, and the Kithra. The children of Arvin Hollow called it Sable's rule. That name stayed. Laws did not rebuild a valley. The first year after the collapse demanded work less dramatic than rescues and more difficult to sustain. Refugees needed homes built outside resonance channels. Miners needed new employment. Glass forests needed red mud cultures before the ash smothered their roots. 11 colonies needed replacement gravity systems that treated living crystal as a partner ecosystem rather than inert circuitry. Mara accepted a temporary appointment to the Epherian Recovery Service, and then discovered that temporary was a word institutions used when they wanted years of someone's life without admitting it. She built a field veterinary center beside Teacher Sen's new school. The central treatment bay had no fixed restraints. Its floor could shift from natural gravity to mechanical support without magnetic fields. One wall opened entirely, so an anxious Kithra never felt trapped. The other walls carried simple diagrams showing tools, procedures, and choices. Niko painted twice-paws once above the entrance in green handprints. Aller visited every 10 days, officially to supervise research, and unofficially because Meridian Mercy felt quiet without calves eating its calibration blocks. He and Mara trained teams of alien doctors in cross-species observation. Their first lesson began with 10 minutes of silence. "You cannot hear what a patient is telling you," Mara told them, "while you are explaining what you already believe." Some students understood at once. Others took longer. A Reth surgeon insisted that visible trembling always meant impending attack in his species. Mara introduced him to an elderly earth terrier who shook whenever excited, cold, frightened, hungry, or aware of cheese. The surgeon took 14 pages of notes and surrendered half his lunch. Sable came only when injured. He refused routine appointments with magnificent consistency. Mara learned to inspect him while pretending to examine nearby mineral moss. He learned to notice the deception and stand just beyond scanner range. "You are a terrible patient," she told him. He stole the scanner. Niko found it 3 days later, buried beside a silicate block. Lumen required more care. His missing capsules regrew slowly, and his heart lattice sometimes lost rhythm during solar storms. He lived near the clinic with 2 young Kithra from the summer shelter. Whenever a storm approached, they pressed against him and shared their microbial signals. Gradually, his patchwork lights became his own. The scar across his back remained. Mara resisted officials who wanted it removed from public images. It was neither shame nor spectacle. It was part of what had happened to him. When Lumen chose to roll in red mud, play with schoolchildren through a reinforced fence, or sleep under the clinic awning with all 6 feet in the air, the scar appeared without defining the rest of him. Prefect Dahl's trial began during the second solar summer. Mara attended because the prosecution subpoenaed her, not because she wanted to see Dahl again. The courtroom orbited Ephra aboard a neutral judicial ship. Its gravity system used no crystal. Dahl sat alone beneath white light. Helix executives had blamed every decision on her. Records showed she ignored Avon's warnings, ordered the station sabotage, and authorized force against the herd. They also showed senior directors threatened to terminate medical support for her home colony if extraction stopped. "Do you believe I am a monster?" Dahl asked Mara during cross-examination. "No." The answer surprised the room. "Why not?" "Because monsters are a way people pretend choices come from some different kind of being. You understood the warnings. You understood the risk. You chose the company every time. And if stopping the mine had killed patients on my world, you could have told the truth and asked 11 colonies to solve the problem together. Instead, you decided everyone else was too selfish to help, so you gave yourself permission to be worse first." Dahl's jaw plates tightened. You know nothing of governing scarcity. I know you aimed a weapon at a child to protect an ore contract. The judges convicted Dahl. They also opened cases against the executives who built the system around her. Mara considered that more important. A single villain made a satisfying story. A supply chain of reasonable people choosing not to look was far more dangerous. Director Kaur attempted a different defense. He claimed scientific necessity and submitted decades of conservation successes. Several species truly had survived because of his authority. He expected past good to purchase permission for present cruelty. Lumen appeared at the hearing through a live field transmission. Kaur's attorney objected that an animal could not be a victim witness. The court allowed the medical evidence instead. Aller described 6 months of conscious cryogenic confinement in precise clinical language. Niko played the first whistle Lumen made after waking. No one in the courtroom mistook the sound for data. Kaur lost his charter, freedom, and every patent derived from trafficked tissue. Those patents entered a public trust. Royalties funded habitat restoration on the 16 worlds represented in his hidden cargo hold. The recovery work produced unexpected alliances. Former Helix miners knew where every tunnel and fault line lay. Ephirian teachers knew how families used the land. Human veterinarians knew that treatment plans failed when communities could not live with them. Pell knew more about gravity systems than anyone willing to admit he was still learning. Together, they designed resonance gardens around settlements. These wide bands of red mud, glass moss, and shallow crystal channels absorbed dangerous pulses. Kithra visited them during migration and redistributed symbionts. No one commanded them. Settlements maintained the gardens because the animals preferred clean water and undisturbed paths. Within 3 years, ash thinned above the northern shelf. Silver grass returned to slopes everyone had declared dead. Insects hatched from Sable's carried capsules. Glass trees grew as translucent shoots no taller than Niko's knee. The first new wild Kithra calf was born under one of those shoots. Ember disappeared into a mud basin at dawn and emerged with a wet copper bundle between her hooks. Sable paced around the clearing, striking the ground at every unfamiliar sound. Mara observed from 100 meters away through a passive scope. She did not approach until Ember lifted her head and called. The newborn's plates were soft enough to show the green branches beneath. It tried to stand on 6 legs, discovered that managing 4 would have been easier, and rolled into Sable's forefoot. He froze as if struck by a restraint beam. Niko whispered, "He is scared." Most new fathers are. He is not the father, Kithra Herd's all-father. Then most new all-fathers are scared. Sable lowered his nose. The calf bit it with toothless gums. The beast who had terrified an alien hospital backed away from a newborn, the size of one jaw hook. Ember pushed him forward again. By sunset, the calf slept between his forelegs. Its birth brought tourists, researchers, and opportunists. Ephra limited access to the recovery zone. Niko argued that complete isolation would turn the Kithra into legends again, and legends were easier to fear than neighbors. He proposed supervised school visits instead. The first group came from a world whose media had called Sable a seismic demon. 20 students arrived in mechanical crawlers and stood behind a low stone boundary. Mara explained that they would not touch, feed, chase, or surround any animal. If a Kithra approached, the children would remain still and let it choose. The newborn approached. It smelled every student, ate one homework slate, and fell asleep on a girl's boots. "What do I do?" she whispered. "Wait," Mara said. "For how long?" Sable lay down across the path, apparently amused. "This may be the rest of your education." Stories changed slowly after that. News feeds stopped calling Kithra death beasts and began calling them valley keepers. Mara disliked both labels when they replaced observation, but the second at least led people to put down their weapons. Meridian Mercy rebuilt its gravity ring using inert superconductors. A small living crystal garden remained at its center, isolated from field coils and tended by recovered miners. Jarek Saul became its keeper. He retained a few harmless crystal beads in his lungs and could still feel strong phase shifts before machines detected them. "Not enough to make me useful at parties," he told Mara, "but enough to keep me away from cheap lifts." The hospital created a department of nonverbal medicine with Aller as its first chief. His official portrait showed him in a new silver mantle. Ember buried that one too during the opening ceremony. Administrator Aru changed the intake protocol for every unknown species. Threat assessment still existed. A hospital could not ignore real danger, but observation came before force whenever time allowed. Restraint required a documented medical reason, the least harmful method, and continuous review. A line beneath the form asked what alternative explanation might account for the behavior. Mara kept a copy above her desk. 5 years after the collapse, a transport arrived carrying a wounded predator from another system. It had killed livestock and charged 3 rescue workers. Staff cleared the new treatment bay, dimmed the lights, and waited outside the open wall while Mara observed. The predator paced, struck the floor, and bared translucent fangs. It did not tremble. Its gaze followed the smallest technician. Every turn shortened the distance between them. "This one is hunting," Mara said. They used barriers, remote sedation, and mechanical restraints before anyone entered. The procedure saved the predator's life and kept the staff safe. A student asked whether that contradicted Sable's rule. "No," Mara said. "Compassion is not pretending danger never exists. It is taking enough care to identify the danger that actually exists. Sable taught us not to restrain fear as if it were violence. He did not teach us to ignore teeth." The predator recovered and returned to a protected range far from farms. Mara sent Sable a recording. He tried to eat the screen. Years changed Niko more visibly than they changed the Kithra. He grew tall enough to reach the lower curve of Sable's hooks without climbing. His childhood stitches faded beneath dark hair. He studied ecological acoustics through the planetary school network and spent every field break mapping migration songs. On his 18th birthday, he received Avon's restored survey license. Teacher Sen gave him the case. Pell gave him a new field meter. Aller gave him 4 volumes of medical ethics that Niko pretended to appreciate. Mara gave him his old lesson tablet. The cracked screen still held the weather mesh application that carried Avon's truth through the clouds. Every message, recording, and childish map had been preserved. "I thought it was lost," Niko said. Pell recovered the memory after the mass transmission. "We kept the cracks." "Why?" "Because repair doesn't require pretending something was never broken." Niko held the tablet against his chest. Sable nudged him into a mud pool. The field team celebrated in the traditional manner, by laughing first and helping later. The next morning, Sable did not rise. He lay beside the emptied mud pool with his legs folded under him. A fine tremor moved through his plates. Mara noticed it from the clinic window and felt the old receiving theater return around her. Blue restraints, charged injectors, armored glass, and 40 people seeing teeth before anything else. She carried the scanner outside. Niko was already beside him. At 18, he no longer fit beneath Sable's jaw, but the beast tried to curve it over him anyway. "No field pulses," Niko said. "No ground movement. He ate yesterday." Mara watched before touching. The tremor began beneath Sable's repaired chest plate, passed through his body, and ended in the left rear foot. The same foot shattered at shaft 9. His dorsal lights dimmed with each wave. The heart lattice had begun shedding crystal. Old damage from the gravity ring, the bullet, and years of resonance work had created a network of microfractures. Symbiotic cells filled them faster than they healed, making the branches thick and brittle. One strong ground song could break the central pathway. Aller arrived before noon with a mobile surgical unit and 5 specialists. No one brought restraints. They set every case on the ground for Sable to smell. They showed him the images. Mara drew the planned repair on a transparent model, remove the damaged branch, grow a flexible scaffold from his own capsules, and reconnect it around the heart. The operation carried a 1 in 3 chance of fatal bleeding. Without it, the next migration would likely kill him. Sable inspected the model, then pushed it away. Niko tapped the request again. The beast pushed his hands away too. He refuses, one specialist said. Mara sat in the dust. She wanted to argue. She wanted to explain how much they could save, how many years might remain, how medicine had improved because of him. None of that turned his body into hers. Then we manage pain and let him choose his movement, she said. Aller watched her carefully, even if the choice shortens his life. Consent is not real only when the patient agrees with us. They packed the unit away. At sunset, Sable rose with difficulty and began walking north. The herd gathered behind him. Migration season was 2 weeks away, but he did not take the valley route. He climbed toward Meridian Mercy's surface beacon. Niko followed. Mara and Aller followed Niko. Sable reached the old rescue landing ground after dark. The station glowed overhead like a white star. He struck the earth twice, paused and struck once. An answer descended from orbit through the hospital's communication lamp. Twice, pause once. Sable touched the surgical model in Mara's pack. He wasn't refusing the operation, Niko said. He was refusing it here. Why? The beast looked toward the station. Mara understood. The first time alien doctors surrounded him, the hospital had been a place of pain. Later, its workers took up his heart rhythm and called him back. He wanted the repair where the whole strange relationship had begun. Choice includes place, she said. Meridian Mercy sent its largest shuttle. Sable entered without sedation. The herd remained at the landing ground, sounding until the craft reached orbit. Inside the reconstructed hospital, staff had converted the old receiving theater into the Department of Nonverbal Medicine. The armored observation glass was gone. The gravity compensator had been replaced by mechanical supports. A mural painted by children showed green lights crossing a field of stars. Sable stopped at the threshold. His nostrils tested the air. The room smelled different, but he found old traces beneath disinfectant. Metal, Aller's species, Mara's rain soap, and perhaps memory itself. He walked in. The procedure lasted 19 hours. Mara opened the old chest repair. Aller isolated the brittle branch. Niko monitored the rhythm with Pell, who had come out of retirement for the 4th time. Surgeons from 5 species took turns building the scaffold 1 crystal thread at a time. Whenever Sable's pulse faltered, staff throughout the hospital tapped twice, paused, and tapped once against walls, desks, and bed frames. The rhythm traveled through the station, without any machine amplifying it. At hour 14, the damaged branch broke before Aller could clamp it. Sable's circulation collapsed. Mara saw blood fill the field and heard someone call for emergency compression. The first day returned once more. A frightened creature convulsing under alien hands, doctors reaching for force because force felt like action. Stop, Mara said. She placed both palms on Sable's chest and felt beyond the shaking. The new scaffold did not lack pressure. Its microbial fibers were rejecting the old heart rhythm. More compression would tear them free. He needs a transition pulse, she said, half speed. Niko changed the pattern. Once longer pause, once. The hospital followed. Sable's heart lattice dimmed, then accepted the slower rhythm. New branches filled green. Aller connected them. Circulation returned. At hour 19, Mara closed the final plate. Sable slept for 2 days. When he woke, he found Niko under one hook, Aller asleep upright in a surgical chair, and Mara on the floor with her white coat folded beneath her head. He tasted the air, lifted his tail, and knocked the chair over. Aller woke before hitting the padding. His motor control is excellent. Sable's throat sac expanded. The pulse that filled the theater was strong, even and free of tremor. He returned to HFY at the start of migration season. The entire herd waited at the landing ground. Ember met him first. Lumen, fully grown and bright with patchwork lights, stood beside her. The newborn calf was no longer small enough to sleep between Sable's legs, but attempted it anyway. Sable led them north. The restored route crossed Shaft 9. Workers had transformed the abandoned drill site into a memorial and residence garden. No tower remained. Avon's field tag rested inside a crystal marker shaped by Kithra pulses rather than machines. Niko walked with Sable past it. Mara followed only to the edge of the northern shelf. Beyond that point, the route entered protected land where no survey team was permitted unless the herd requested help. It had taken years for people to learn that preservation could include absence. Sable paused at the boundary. He returned to Mara, smelled her hands, and touched the old scar on her shoulder where one of his hooks had rested during their first operation. Then he turned away. The herd disappeared among young glass trees. Their green dorsal lights moved through the forest like a constellation, descending into earth. Mara did not know whether Sable was saying goodbye. Human beings had a habit of turning every animal gesture into a sentence about themselves. She knew only what she observed. He had chosen to come back once, and now he had chosen to go. That was enough. The next spring, Meridian Mercy received a priority call from the northern boundary. A survey drone had found a cargo marker beside the road. No Kithra appeared on camera. The marker bore tooth dents and a strip of shed copper plate. Inside the attached field cache lay 3 injured glassworms, wrapped carefully in silver grass. The largest had a splint made from part of Mara's missing scanner. "He's referring patients," Aller said when the shipment arrived. "Without completing intake forms. We can waive them for a senior colleague." Mara treated the glassworms and returned them to the marker with mineral salve, fresh grass, and a new scanner. The scanner vanished. 2 weeks later, it reappeared with readings from a sick calf already stored in memory. Sable had learned to operate exactly one button. He pressed it more accurately than many interns. The exchange became a quiet system. The herd left samples and images when it wanted assistance. The clinic offered treatment plans through sent maps and models. Sometimes the Kithra accepted. Sometimes they did not. No one called refusal noncompliance. No one sent a capture team. Other worlds adapted the method. Ocean creatures indicated choices through currents. Fungal colonies changed color around treatment models. A silent machine species used heat patterns. Medicine expanded not because every patient learned to speak like its doctors, but because doctors learned to ask in more than one way. Mara remained on HFY long after her temporary appointment expired. Her hair acquired a silver streak above one temple. Her left knee predicted storms less accurately than Sable, but complained more dramatically. She taught, operated, and occasionally recovered stolen equipment from mud pools. Niko became the first licensed ecological acoustician to hold a joint appointment with a veterinary service. He never called himself Sable's translator. "He doesn't need me to put words in his mouth," he told students. "I help people notice when he already answered." The lesson mattered far beyond HFY. A decade after Mara entered the receiving theater, Chief Aller asked her to review an emergency recording from a hospital on the edge of Concordat space. The patient was an armored swamp animal called a vacun, massive enough to overturn a ground shuttle. It had bitten a young nurse during flood rescue and then locked its jaws around a second patient's bed. The local doctors prepared chemical restraints. Before administering them, an intern noticed that the vacun's rear legs shook whenever the ward's ultraviolet sterilizers flashed. She turned the lights off. The trembling stopped. That alone did not make the animal safe. The nurse's wound was real, and the vacun still held the bed. Staff erected a mechanical barrier, evacuated the room, and watched through passive cameras. Without the painful light, the animal loosened its jaws. Beneath the bed, they found a larval vacun hidden in a drainage blanket. The adult had not been trying to consume the patient. It had been trying to retrieve its young while half-blinded by radiation its species could see, and humans could not. The nurse needed surgery. The animal needed treatment for retinal burns. Both recovered. The intern ended her report with a sentence used in hospitals across the region. Behavior is evidence, not a verdict. Mara saved the recording beside Sable's first scan. There were failures too. Some institutions adopted the language of consent without changing practice. They renamed cages as comfort enclosures and restraint beams as reassurance fields. Mara visited one facility, listened to its director praise Sable's rule, and then found sedated animals stored behind a wall the tour omitted. She closed the facility with help from its own junior staff. "A rule cannot observe for you," she told the inquiry. "Ethics become decoration when no one is willing to notice what contradicts the brochure." That sentence proved less popular than the others, which was why she repeated it. The Epherian clinic made its records public except for locations that could expose the herd. Every adverse outcome stayed in the archive. One calf died from a fungal infection they identified too late. A migrating adult rejected treatment and was found dead after a storm. Mara documented the limits of their understanding beside the successes. Niko hated those records. He helped write them anyway. "If we hide mistakes because people might fear the Kithra again," Mara said, "we become dull with a kinder logo." He knew she was right. Knowing did not make grief smaller. The herd returned the dead adult's shed plates to the clinic. Niko and Pell built them into a resonant marker that carried his unique pulse when wind crossed it. The Kithra visited once, listened, and moved on. Human mourners wanted the animals to stay longer. Mara reminded them that grief had different shapes. Sable's shape was motion. After every loss, he led the herd to another damaged valley and restarted what could still grow. His work became easier as settlements changed around him. Roads crossed migration routes on bridges with silent mechanical supports. School schedules included passage weeks. Farmers planted mineral corridors at field edges and discovered that Kithra kept burrowing glassworms away from foundations. What began as accommodation became ordinary life. Children born after the collapse found old footage of armed doctors almost unbelievable. Why did they point weapons at him if he was shaking? One student asked Mara. Because they were shaking too, she said. They just did it on the inside. Did that make them bad? It made them responsible for what they chose next. Fear arrives before permission. Force should not. The student considered this and drew a picture of Aller being sneezed onto by Sable. The image joined the clinic's permanent collection. Aller objected to its anatomical inaccuracies, then commissioned a better frame. He had changed in ways no medical board could capture. The surgeon who once dismissed Mara as a livestock doctor now required every new resident to spend a month working beside veterinarians, refuge keepers, and nonverbal patients. When challenged, he pointed out that medicine had spent centuries dividing knowledge by the social status of the body receiving it. Bodies had never respected the division. Mara changed too. She no longer assumed quiet observation made her neutral. Seeing fear created an obligation to name it, but naming was only the beginning. Someone had to lower the field, move the weapon, question the report, protect the evidence, and remain when the frightened patient became inconvenient. On difficult mornings, she remembered how close she had come to saying nothing in that first theater. Her courage had not felt grand. It had felt like one sentence spoken before she knew whether anyone would listen. Don't inject it. Every reform, rescue, trial, garden, and living calf had followed because a room paused long enough to test that sentence. On the 10th anniversary of the shelf collapse, the memorial held no military parade and no speeches by company officials. Families gathered at Shaft 9. Teachers read the names of the dead. Jarek brought a cutting from Meridian Mercy's living crystal garden. Pell complained that the placement calculations were wrong and then fixed them himself. Mara stood beside Avon's marker as dusk entered the forest. A tremor passed through the ground. Some visitors flinched. No one ran. Children placed their hands on the earth and listened. Twice pause once. The answer came from hundreds of meters away. Green lights appeared among the trees. Sable emerged older, broader, and walking without a limp. Ember came beside him. Lumen followed with 2 calves carrying new patchwork capsules. Behind them moved more Kithra than Mara could count in the fading light. The herd had grown. Sable approached the memorial crowd. Alien doctors, miners, schoolchildren, and former refugees stood without barriers. No weapons rose. No restraint bands charged. Everyone made room. He stopped before Mara. For a moment, the most feared beast on Ephra and the human veterinarian who had first seen him tremble simply watched each other. Then Sable lowered his head. Mara rested her forehead against the warm copper plate between his eyes. His body shivered once beneath her hands. This time it was not pain. It was not fear, warning, sickness, grief, or the hidden vibration of a machine. The newborn calves crowded around his legs. Niko laughed. The living forest answered with light. Mara did not need a scanner to understand. The impossible thing had never been that a deadly beast could choose not to attack, warn a hospital, heal a living machine, or save children from a mountain. The impossible thing was that so many people had once believed teeth made those choices impossible. They knew better now.